conclusion of that meeting, it was discovered that an inadvertent clerical error had been made related to the teleconference location listed on the agenda. Out of abundance of caution, to cure any potential issues arising from the clerical error, the following action items are presented to the council for discussion, deliberation, and decision.
All right.
Items that did not require action, hold on there.
Sorry.
By the council, such as proclamations, disclosure of top 10 maximum contributors, staff updates, council items for future consideration, and council comments have not been included in the agenda. In addition, you'll see certain items throughout the agenda that will be brought back at a later date as well.
City Clerk?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would just like to add that any resolution actions that are taken at this meeting will be updated to reflect a March 10th adopted date.
Okay, perfect. Thank you so much. All right, I'll call this meeting to order. We are going to do a salute to the flag because we're going to keep with our agenda. Ready? Begin.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, moving on to appointments. The Ad Hoc Committee for Campaign Disclosure Requirements and Campaign Statement Filing. I'd like to suggest myself and Councilmember Scare. Do I have a second? So we have a motion by Vice Mayor Jacob, seconded by Councilmember DeHart. Clerk, please call the roll.
Appointing Mayor Soyseth and Councilmember Esquer to serve on the Ad Hoc Committee for Campaign Disclosure Requirements and Campaign Statement Filing. Councilmember Esquer?
Yes.
Councilmember DeHart?
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Mayor Soyseth?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Moving on to public participation. This is limited to items described in the notice for this meeting. You'll have 5 minutes to address the council. Is there anyone that would like to address the council at this time? Okay, seeing none, moving on. Declaration of conflicts of interest and disqualifications. Looking left and right, seeing none. Consent calendar. Any items to be removed from the consent calendar? Yes, Councilmember DeHart.
Yes, Mayor, I'd like to remove item J for further discussion.
All right, perfect. So, any other items? Yes.
And item M, please.
All right. Any other items? Okay. What's the pleasure of the council with the consent calendar minus items J and M?
I'd like to advance the consent.
Okay, we have a motion by Councilmember DeHart, seconded by Vice Mayor Jacob. Clerk, please call the roll.
Adopting the amended consent calendar. Councilmember Esquer?
Yes.
Councilmember DeHart?
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak?
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob?
Yes.
Mayor Soyseth?
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Moving on to item J, Councilmember DeHart.
Thanks, Mayor. In our previous meeting, I explained that I pulled this item for a specific reason, that being that I think it's always important to keep before the public the understanding as to why we're expending $500,000. Certainly on replacement vehicles for the police department. Why? How did we get here? And so I think it's always wise to educate not only ourselves, because it's more than just a passing item on a consent calendar, but to certainly give full attention. Chief, if you would go ahead and please explain as you did last time, I'd appreciate it.
Thank you, Councilmember DeHart, Mayor, and council members. So the item before you is a resolution approving the purchase of approximately 14 vehicles for the police department. The budgeting for these vehicles is done on an annual basis with the thought that we know we're going to be replacing vehicles depending on their use and mileage, and we put forth the amount of money set forth for those expenditures. Today you have approximately 14 vehicles, and in looking at your council report, you'll see that one of them is almost 11 years old. So it all depends on where we're using those vehicles. And the total amount we're asking for is actually approximately $603,000 that was budgeted for, that is in the small equipment replacement fund. And those monies are funded responsibly every year with our budget. So with that, I'll open to questions.
Any additional questions from the audience? Okay, what's the pleasure of the council on this item?
Mayor, I'd just like to ask one last thing. It's not just replacement vehicles with high mileage. Mm-hmm. It's also vehicles that have been smashed into, run over, flipped over, turned, burned, et cetera, et cetera. So we do have some replacement needs for those types of circumstance. And so it's also been addressed properly in the budget in terms of accruing the resources for future expenditures. That's what this particular item does. And so I'd like to thank you very much, Chief, for the explanation. And I'd like to advance the measure.
Thank you.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Dehart, seconded by Councilmember Scare. Clerk, please call the roll.
Approving the purchase and delivery of 6 replacement marked police vehicles, 1 replacement CSO vehicle, 1 replacement VIPS vehicle, 1 replacement cadet vehicle, 1 replacement animal control vehicle, caged, 2 replacement admin vehicles, and 1 replacement detective vehicle from Downtown Ford Sales, Sacramento, California, through the State of California contract number 1-16-23-10A, 1-16-23-20A, and 1-1623-23A, in a total amount not to exceed $564,280, and approving the purchase and delivery of 1 replacement detective vehicle from Elk Grove Auto Group in Elk Grove, California, through the State of California contract number 1-16-23-10B, in a total amount not to exceed $38,760, from account number 506-00000213-51020, police equipment replacement without compliance to the formal bid process in accordance with Turlock Municipal Code Section 2-7-08B6, and declaring replaced vehicles surplus once replaced. Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dehart,
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Soisek.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. On to item N. Councilmember Bublak.
Yes, in relation to this job description, sorry.
I'll just ask the question I asked last time. It was pursuant to a government code. How long has that government code been in effect?
Can I, do you know, City Attorney Norton?
Well, I'm pretty sure 40814 has been in effect for a long time, but the code talks about attestment to the document, unrelated to the notary issue.
And so the reason why we were taking the notary requirement out of the city clerk job description is, as Jennifer attests to documents and things that council signs, it's kind of a conflict for her to then notarize them. So we decided to remove it, and there will be another employee that will be doing notary.
And that the expense of training will be moved from one fund to the other?
Yeah, what we were expending for city clerk lands notary will go to the other employees. It's actually an employee in the city manager's office, so,
Thank you.
thanks.
All right, any additional questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Scare.
Just a quick comment again on the notary part. Yeah, that's been with Secretary of State for a lot of years, so I know it's been there for more than 16 years.
Any additional questions or comments from the audience or council? All right, what's the pleasure of the council?
Move to accept.
All right, we have a motion by Councilmember Bublak, second by Councilmember Dehart. Clerk, please call the roll.
Approving modifications to the job description for the position of city clerk, effective, which it did say February 27, 2017, but that will be effective March 10th, 2018. Excuse me, 2018, not 2017, 2018. Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dehart,
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob.
Yes.
Mayor Soisek.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. We have no final readings and public hearings. Item 7A will be brought back to the council at a future meeting date. Scheduled matters, request to approve contract change order number 1 for city project number 17-28, building demolition at 323 Columbia Street. Does staff have any additional information?
Actually, generally, there's a little bit of information, part of what we had discussed the other day, but I'll just kind of basically note that this particular change order is going to be the only change order we're expecting with the project, which will give the project total cost up at $107,575. Additional information we do have would be related to the lien process that's associated with this, and I'll call up Chief Gomez, and he can discuss that a little bit with us.
Great, thank you.
Good morning. The lien process, it is a process, and we still had bills coming in, so we were trying to gather as much of the bills and manifest as we could. However, we're going to move forward with the lien process, and if any other bills come in, we will address them as they come in. We have it all ready to go for review, and if the city clerk can help me with the dates again for council approval.
Thank you Fire Marshal Gomez. So there are some noticing requirements that we need to adhere to. There's a 10-day noticing that we are required to mail to the property owner or responsible party. So depending upon the timeline of which the staff report is prepared, reviewed, and approved for a council agenda, we may be looking at potentially March 27th or perhaps the first meeting in April to ensure that we take all the appropriate actions that are required for the lien process.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, at this time, we've accounted for approximately 122,000 and some change to lien the property. And I'm foreseeing additional charges as time goes on and bills are submitted to us.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any additional comments or questions from the council or the audience on this item? Yes, Councilmember Bublak.
I just want to just state that this is the taxpayers' money, and we shouldn't be nickel and diming like, oh, well, we think there's going to be more money spent on it. We need to, if it's an investment of $25,000 or more, let's put the lien and go forward. We can add on to that, but I don't want us to get stuck with not having the money that we put into the property. So I'm still gonna be a no for that reference, but I also want us to look into things like that. I think we need to, as a group, know that we need to see how we're expending money and how important it is when we do it, that it's already covered, that the cost is gonna be covered by something else. So I think that we need that process to look a little different, so.
Okay.
Are you referring to the lien process of gathering bills? And I just looking for direction.
Sure, like, when I used to work with Ms. Norton, we used to do that all the time with the buildings inspector. And you could put the lien on the property pretty quickly, and then any other incurred expenses, you just kept adding up on top of those liens. So that we didn't get somebody coming behind us, picking up the property, and they don't have to pay for it.
Understand.
So Councilmember Bublak, if you want to work with Fire Marshal Gomez and maybe the interim city manager on some language and some improvements, I'm happy to bring that back. Absolutely. All right, any additional comments or questions? Thank you so much, Fire Marshal.
Thank you.
Thanks so much, Eric. What's the pleasure of the council? There we go. Second, anybody? All right, we have a motion by Vice Mayor Jacob, seconded by Councilmember Dehart. Clerk, please call the roll.
Approving contract change order number 1 in the amount of $9,775 for city project number 17-28, building demolition at 323 Columbia Street, bringing the contract total to $107,575. Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dehart,
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak,
No,
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Soisek.
Yes, 4-1. Thank you. Scheduled matters, item 8B was removed from the February 27th agenda. Item C, request to determine the closure for the Turlock American Little League to host the 2018 Little League opening ceremonies is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, and approve a special event permit application for the 2018 Little League opening ceremonies and authorize associated closure. Director Van Gilder.
Thank you, Mayor and Council. The item before you is in regard to the approval of a special event that is taking place on Saturday, March 3rd from 7:30 to 11 a.m. Associated with this special event is the closure of Johnson Road between Julene Elementary and Charles Place for pedestrian safety. At this time, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
So the obvious is we were there already. So this meeting is ratifying, correct? It's not
That
approving.
is
so it's
correct.
already been-
That is correct.
Yeah, so that's why we're doing it one more time. Yes.
I just have to be the one that's gonna ask the question of our attorney. If we vote no now, did Little League not happen?
Clearly, the event happened.
My shoulder's still sore from
The
throwing out the
purpose
first
of
pitch.
this
so, yes.
meeting is to cure any potential issues that resulted from the prior meeting. That's the sole purpose of this meeting.
Perfect. Thank you so much. Any additional questions or comments from the audience or the council? All right, what's the pleasure of the council on this item?
Advance?
All right, do I have a second? So we have a motion by Councilmember Dehart, seconded by Councilmember Scare. Clerk, please call the roll.
Determining the closure of Johnson Road between the Julene Elementary School parking lot and Charles Place for the Turlock American Little League to host the 2018 Little League opening ceremonies is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, in accordance with Section 15304, minor alterations to land of the CEQA guidelines. Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dehart,
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Soisek.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. And what's the pleasure on the second resolution?
Second?
All right, we have a motion by Vice Mayor Jacob, second by Councilmember Dehart. Clerk, please call the roll.
Approving a special event permit application for the 2018 Little League opening ceremonies hosted by the Turlock American Little League, authorizing the associated closure of Johnson Road between the Julian Elementary School parking lot and Charles Place for pedestrian safety on Saturday, March 3rd, 2018, from 7:30 a.m. to 11 a.m., and authorizing the city manager to apply appropriate conditions and restrictions on the street closure. Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dehart,
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Soisek.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Thank you so much, Allison. And the second one, item D, a request to determine the closure for the Syrian American Civic Club of Turlock to host the Syrian New Year Parade is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, and approve a special event permit application for the Syrian New Year Parade hosted by the Syrian American Civic Club of Turlock, and authorize the associated closure. Director Van Gilder.
Thank you. Again, Mayor and Council, this item is also to ratify another special event and associated street closure, this time for the Assyrian New Year Parade to take place on Saturday, March 24th from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m. The associated closure will begin at Main Street at Front Street and will travel all the way down to Broadway, where they will proceed to the fairgrounds. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Any questions or comments? Any questions or comments from the audience? Okay, bring it back. What's the pleasure of the council? All right, do I have a second? We have a motion by Vice Mayor Jacob, second by Councilmember Dehart. Clerk, please call the roll.
Determining the closure of North First Street between West Main Street and A Street, West Main Street between the Union Pacific Railroad tracks and Market Street, and North Broadway between West Main Street and North Front Street for the Assyrian American Civic Club of Turlock to host the Assyrian New Year Parade is exempt from the provisions of the California Environmental Quality Act, CEQA, in accordance with Section 15304, minor alterations to land of the CEQA guidelines. Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dehart,
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Soisek.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. What's the pleasure of the second?
Vance?
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
We have a motion by Councilmember Dehart, second by Councilmember Esquer. Clerk, please call the roll.
Approving a special event permit application for the Assyrian New Year Parade hosted by the Assyrian American Civic Club of Turlock, authorizing the associated closure of North First Street between West Main Street and A Street, West Main Street between the Union Pacific Railroad tracks and Market Street, and North Broadway between West Main Street and North Front Street for pedestrian safety on Saturday, March 24th, 2018, from 8 a.m. to 12 p.m., and authorizing the city manager to apply appropriate conditions and restrictions on the street closure. Councilmember Esquer,
Yes.
Councilmember Dehart,
Yes.
Councilmember Bublak,
Yes.
Councilmember Jacob,
Yes.
Mayor Soisek.
Yes, motion carries 5-0. Thank you so much, Allison. I will be leaving this meeting open. We will be adjourning to closed session after the workshop, so I'm going to take a break from this meeting and reopen the workshop. So thank you so much. Thanks for everyone's patience. Who's up? Kelly.
Thank you. I just have a couple augmentation requests that fall outside the general fund now. Out of the Fund 240, which is our small equipment replacement and repairs, requesting an electronic door lock and secured access for the payroll office. At this time, we just have a regular key lock. And Human Resources Lobby was, there were some security upgrades done, so requesting the funding to pay for that. In the Fund 501, which is IT Information Technology, these items were brought in May when you adopted the 2-year budget. I'm bringing them back because the need is still there. IT does not have a manager, and it is imperative that there be a manager, because basically they're all a wonderful group of people, but it's always a good idea to have a supervisor in that group, whereas it's just I'm over them and they're all wonderful, but it would be nice to have someone that would serve as a manager.
Thank you, Kelly. As I stated, public comment is still open, so Mr. Franson, did you have a comment? Yeah. It's a workshop, so we're trying to be informal but formal, so go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to go back. I didn't hear any opportunity to stand up, didn't want to interrupt, but on the general fund, on the general fund property taxes and the sales taxes and all of the revenue. According to the U.S. Department of Commerce, the sales increase was 5.7% for the fourth quarter from 2016 to 17. What was the city of Turlock's increase from last year in a percent?
Maren, do you have that, or?
Well, I can go look, but I don't, off the top, I don't have.
Okay. So I just thought it'd be good to use that as some sort of a standard to see where we're at. And then also with the e-commerce, it increased 16.9% from 2016 to 2017 in the fourth quarter. So that was obviously more of a jump online. But however, the total commerce though increased 4.4% for all of 2016 to 17. So something, I don't know where the city of Turlock was at in total increase. And then the e-commerce jumped 16% from 2016 to 17 in total. But just so you guys know, I don't believe that the focus is all of the online sales that everyone thinks, because e-commerce only accounted for 8.9% in 2017. And it was only 8% in 2016. So still a small percent of total commerce and probably about a 10% increase. Now, the big increase is actually would be the online advertising. So the online advertising has gone up since 2013 from 42 billion to 49 billion to 59 billion. In 2016, though, it jumped to 72.5 billion. And then we don't have the final 2017, but it's estimated at about 86 billion. So that was the biggest increase, which was the online advertising, not necessarily the online selling. And so I have been trying to get the city of Turlock to do some form of online grants for businesses, because back in the old days, probably John Lazar was just mayor, so about 2006, there was some facade grants offered by the city of Turlock to fix up storefronts. And actually one of those examples was Youngdale's, which is right over here. And they redid their whole building with some grant from the city of Turlock and then closed down. So all that would be doing is shifting money around the city, essentially. Whereas if we could help businesses online, I'm not even saying sell, because we're probably not there yet, but we definitely need to be looking at bringing in more people from, say, the Ceres area and the Delhi area that could go to Modesto or Merced to a Costco or a Target and try to get them into Turlock, because that's our only shot that I see, which, by the way, could almost become immediate increase in revenue. And then also I had a question of the general fund was during the recession, or just before the recession, it was at about 28 million. And we were told that we had no money for roads, but then the recession hit and obviously we found ways to cut. So I was told we had a lean machine in 2006, and then 2008, 9, 10, 11, we went down to $24 million. Now we're at what, about 36 million? So we've increased approximately $12 million in the general fund reserve revenue, or the budget. Could anyone in staff just give, a very overarching view of where that $12 million a year now is going? Because I see that as a big jump, that's almost like, what, 50%? So.
Are you citing the revenue numbers, or are you citing the expenditure numbers?
I'm talking about the general fund budget. It was at the lowest $24 million, right? That's expenditures, I guess. Let's do that. And now we're talking about are we talking about a general fund budget of about 35, 36 million? So where's that $12 million a year going? Has say PERS increased by 50%, or has our staff, because it looks like we have a lot of money coming in, but I don't know all the expenses, but what's the big hit that maybe is a 50% increase? And because I also noticed too, you made a note about where we expended some of our reserve to pay down debt, right? And so that was supposed to be some savings for us, but where'd that savings go then to?
There's 600,000 per year for 10 years.
Right, Things like that, and like our TOT. We have booked hotels, we're bringing in 1.2 million now, but like what services are we providing back to, say, the hotels or to provide the services for visitors? I don't see a jump in services, I see a jump in a lot of expenses. So just as, if we could get some sort of a general vision about where that money's going. I don't know if city staff might have a few big areas.
I can get it for you.
Oh,
Is that, yeah, I mean,
Okay,
I'll
yeah.
have to pull it out of the, yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
So
yeah.
kind of, this was revenue from 12 till now, so do the expenditure part of salaries and what, and then you can see every year what the increase is. And would that be helpful? That's where more money's being spent.
Just for them to have information.
Okay, yeah,
Absolutely.
of course.
And I appreciate the comments, because that's the point of this workshop, is so that when we bring this back, when we
Exactly.
actually take action, you guys can bring us some more information. So, great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, great.
Thanks,
I'm sorry. So I was on IT and the importance of having an IT manager, and then also in IT, the division has no administrative staff, meaning to do all the paperwork, the contracts, all of that type of work, keeping it organized. And the guys do an okay job, but they're tech guys. And it would really help if they had somebody an office assistant. We have lots and lots of software agreements, licensing. We have to keep on top of it. We have to look for discounts where we can pay, if we pay Windows licensing for 3 years, we get a discount over if we wait till the last minute or our license expires. So that's that request, that they could have an office assistant, someone to give them that administrative support. And then for On Base, which is our scanning, where we scan all the documents for digital scanning, we have a maintenance agreement that we need some additional funding for. And other than that, for Workers' Comp Fund 510, our premium was more than we had budgeted, so we need an additional $71,000, and that's for our excess. So that's actually has a premium, and then the excess carrier is the one that jumps in if a claim hits a certain threshold. Okay, and I think that's all for me. Do you guys have questions?
Any additional questions? Like I said, if anyone in the audience, or especially the council members, get with the department heads if you have questions about these before we bring it back, and do some homework and figure out what you're comfortable with. Is a passing, basically. We're going to be looking at what's really critical and what's needed, and what's a want, something we can't pass. So thanks for having an open door policy.
Great, thank you.
All right, who's next? Do we have municipal, or is it housing? Let's go in the order of the big. You said the agenda. Yes, the agenda, but these are all housing now. I guess next.
Yeah, we're on page 3.
There we go.
Good morning, Mayor and Council. As you might remember, that when housing's budgets were proposed as part of last year's budget process, since the uncertainty of the federal authorizations and the formula grant amounts were not yet known, you approved the housing budgets as placeholder budgets. Once those came in, we now have more finite numbers, and so the items before you are basically to supplement areas where we have room in our administrative budgets, primarily to make sure that housing program services is not in the general fund, in order to cover all of our costs. Specifically, we've moved money around both in terms of overhead, and then you'll notice down on line 30, in terms of housing, affordable housing development, we've moved money around in order to accommodate sort of shifts in the marketplace and in our program delivery. We also have an item that will be coming before you that basically will be redoing the We Cares homeless shelter bathrooms, and those are considered a public improvement, so that answers the item that we've increased from $0 to $250,000 for that project. Otherwise, the rest of them are just small incidental items relative to the effect of the MOUs and some advertising vehicle insurance to make sure that we're covering our expenses. And I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Week carries 32, is that what you said?
Line item 32,
Okay.
correct.
Thank you. Any questions, comments on this? Thank you, Mayor. Perfect. Now we can go community services. There we go.
Good morning, Mayor and members of the City Council. I'm handing out a memo here that summarizes the 3 or 4 pages you have on the 11 by 17, but basically it's two parts. One, budget amendments for this year. Basically, we only have one minor budget amendment for the current year. That's our phone integrated voice response system. It's basically an error when you adopted that resolution in 2017. The funds were authorized to be paid out of the water fund. We never appropriated those funds. So it's just a technical error. So we'll adjust that in the amount of $37,800. The rest are just salary and benefits change that resulted from the MOU that you recently signed with the employee associations. So that's the only change for this year. In the coming budget year, I broke it down into chunks that make sense to me. So the first one, the personnel changes. One, at the wastewater treatment facility, not backfilling a open lead plant operator position and just downgrading that to an entry-level operator 1-2. That would save us about $43,000. I will be recommending that we reclassify the regulatory affairs manager position to a deputy director, reclassifying the existing senior lab tech to lab supervisor. That's because we have some changes in how our laboratory is state certified. The state's changing the certification program. There has to be an outside independent person approving lab results. Right now, our wastewater treatment plant manager is also the lab director. And so the state's concerned to move that way to have an independent sign-off so that the manager is not falsifying lab results. Obviously, that doesn't happen in Turlock, but we need a separate set of eyes. And then the other one is converting 2 part-time clerical positions into 1 full-time clerical position, primarily to help with our remote locations. The challenges with our department is administration here is City Hall. Most of the staff are at 701 and 901 South Walnut. And we've noticed some inefficiencies for the amount of paperwork that our guys in the field process. If we could provide them with some clerical assistance, allow them to spend more time in the field. So that's a net increase of $58,000. The other one is the addition of 3 utility maintenance workers. That will be as we integrate service water, add wellhead treatment, and chlorination to our well system. So with the deputy director and lab supervisor, that's no net increase. Staff services assistant will be 1 net increase, but it eliminates 2 part-time positions. And the 3 utility maintenance workers are new positions, but this is the first net increase in staffing since 2012. And just so you know, our department has 4 divisions. Historically, we had 1 manager per division. Right now, we have 2 managers. Garner's overseeing 1, and our WQC manager is overseeing another. The utility billing manager position was downgraded to a supervisor position. And in utility maintenance, that's been open for a while. We couldn't find a backfill person, so right now, Garner's overseeing part of that department, and I oversee fleet maintenance and electrical mechanical maintenance. So it's put more of a burden on what we do. And going forward, we'd like to look at that whole structure and see what changes we can make. Just from a personnel standpoint, you'll hear more and more of this today. We're having a harder time filling positions because of our competitiveness. We've lost assistant supervisors to promotions in the city. We've had one is now moving over to Monterey for a better position. Last time we did a recruitment for 2 openings, or actually 3 openings. We had 5 good candidates. The top 3 turned us down over pay. 1 stayed in Newman. 1 went from Ceres to Modesto for more pay. And 1 who was a Livingston resident would rather stay working in the Bay Area. So while we're not in the same dire straits as some of your other general funded positions, just so you know, by holding the salaries and benefits as we have for the last few years, it does make us harder to compete. And we compete for our workers in community services against the private sector. So Foster Farms, Hill Marchies, Blue Diamond, plumbing contractors, and as they're starting to pay more, we're struggling to attract workers as we did in the past. So I just want you to be aware of that. And also within our department, we're having issues with salary compaction, inequity in supervisor pay, and some other things that, as you work on negotiations this year, I'm hoping to address. So we have situations where senior workers earning more than the supervisor, depending what division they're in, that needs to be addressed. So going back to page 2, just going through the equipment purchases, some large expenses, but primarily money we've budgeted and set aside to replace equipment that's at the end of its useful life. And then capital projects, apart from the first two, 56 and 51, these are small new capital projects. The rest of them are holdovers from this current budget year. So things we haven't got done this year, we want to do next year. So like the pressurization system, the clarifier re-roof, and some other things. And then finally, on page 3, supplies and professional services, more chlorine for our water system. We have to do some more analysis in our discharge permits. It's going to need some professional services help. Our regulatory fees have gone up significantly. And just so you understand, as the state has struggled with its budget, it's found a way to reach the cities to pay more of their administrative staff to reduce the state's cost. So it's almost doubled our cost of the permit fees we have with the state of California. So they're not the same as Eric, where he's trying to keep his fees low. They're like, we'll stick it to the cities, and we have to pay those fees. We have no choice. So again, we have to adjust that up about $175,000. And the last one is the biosolids recycling. The cost of disposal will jump significantly next year, and we're just trying to plan for that. And again, most of these things are budgeted, and we'll use our existing operating budget or pull money from reserves to pay for them. So there is no impact to the general fund. With that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Any questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember Dier.
Seeing as how Sacramento's become very adept at answering or coming up with creative financing, as in the last category that you just mentioned, perhaps we could do the same. Let me just ask the feasibility of coming up with some dollars from our enterprise fund to pay for some of our employees. What kind of flexibility do we have in that area with respect to competitive salaries, et cetera, et cetera?
Part of the challenge you have is your miscellaneous employees are mainly covered under the Turlock City Employees Association, so it's one bargaining unit that covers general fund and non-general fund employees. So as your general fund struggles like it has, you'll say, okay, so we can afford a 1% increase. And so it creates some challenges, and that's something the city's wrestled with ever since I've worked here, is how do you treat a utility worker different from a parks worker just because they're paid from a different account. So you need to work at that. And the other item you bring to mind is whatever the municipal services or your utilities impact on the general fund, we pay that back. So we pay for security services, we pay for the city attorney's time, we pay for some of the city manager's time, commensurate with our impact on those funds. And that's something the cities and your finance staff has done a very good job over the years of tracking. So there is no impact of the utilities on the general fund.
I'm just trying to figure out how much additionally we can be creative.
Right.
You know, it just seems to me that everybody's got an answer because they have thought it through and conjured up patchwork solutions.
Right.
As policy. It just seems to me that we might be able to do the same. I'm just trying to find out.
Yeah, and we do take things, you know, and look at the laws and regulations, see what we can do, and be as progressive as we can, but recognize a lot of cities get in trouble when they start using enterprise funds for the wrong purpose, and there's plenty of litigation and state legislation that prohibits you from doing that.
Any additional questions for Director Cook? Thank you. Appreciate it, Michael. All right, moving on, Development Services. Let's take that one on. Mr. Pachano.
Okay, just moving along as we are. Essentially, I'm going to kind of reference some of the line numbers. It's just everybody kind of does their own way of doing this. I just want to kind of make sure that you're understanding how I'm going to actually step through this particular process. Start with line number 70. Essentially, it's printer maintenance. It's not like it's a major item. However, as the development services is the engine that helps with the, keeping the economy of the community running, this is just one of those items as, our maintenance of equipment is increasing. The next item, item 71, is actually becoming where it starts to become noticeable. Right now, the planning department is down one person. When you only have 4, that means we're down 25%. And with a loss of the retirement of Debbie Whitmore. So with this reduction in that, we're going to need to utilize an outside consultant. So the idea here is to allow us the use of the outside consultant. However, the idea also is to utilize that salary savings because we do not have that position filled at this point in time. So the idea is essentially an exchange. Supplies general, in this case, again, we're just looking for some basic supplies in line 72. Line 74, as we jump down to that one, is all about testing and recruitment. This, again, is related to the expenses of, replacing the planning manager. So we originally had budgeted for this fiscal year. However, we do not believe that's going to occur this particular fiscal year, so we just want to move it forward to next fiscal year. Then training, this is actually a new item on line 75 of training of the Planning Commission. At this point in time, most of the planning commissioners have been there 1 year or less, and they're actually in need of training. Some of them actually have requested training, but there's never been a line number for training of the planning commissioners. So I think as this is probably an important item to consider. The value that we put in there is under the assumption that all commissioners will probably take part in the trainings. We can't make an assumption that none will. But that is the idea there with the planning commissioner training budget. And we wanted to keep that separate from the staff training budget so that there is no confusion as to where this money will be utilized. Okay. Moving on to local transportation, the Fund 216. This one actually I'm going to probably refer back to later on again, but this is associated with the request for a traffic technician in the Fund 502, the engineering department, trying to make some changes here that actually will affect the community as a whole. We have issues with our traffic and keeping up on the needs of the traffic services. So that's something I'm going to bring back here as this discussion proceeds. Moving on to the 219 SB1 funds. Obviously, when this budget was conceived, SB1's funds were not available. And so we have a couple of things going on with this particular one. And one of the major items in lines 79 through 84 is all about revenue. Generally, the community road maintenance portion is available to be expended with SB1. So Allison will be up here later on to have some comments related to this also. We've had some discussions and how we can possibly utilize some of the SB1 funds to aid in the basic road maintenance of the city of Turlock. So both Allison and I think this is a very important item that you need to consider. So with this, we have the opportunity to have the labor and the equipment for the pothole repairs, maintenance of the thermoplastic roadway markings within this funding source. And so these positions will also be allowed to create allow public surface facilities the opportunity to expand their pothole repair team. Again, so this is a major help to the community in general. But however, currently we do not have a financially efficient means to perform the maintenance of striping. So that's why we wanted to go ahead and purchase this, the equipment along with possibly employing additional staff to take care of the thermoplastic. From the engineering side of striping, thermoplastic is definitely the way that the engineering department prefers to install the material as well as public facilities. It's a longer term product, and the maintenance is associated with that is less term as far as the overall expenses for the long-term budget. Okay, line 85s. Again, this is related to the transfers out. Another allowable expense for the SB1 funding is the funding to utilize the match for federally funded projects. So this is the engineering department's portion of the SB1 fund is what I'm actually discussing here. As you may know, our Section 2103 gas tax funds have been supporting this expenses in the past. However, we start looking forward, the Section 2103 gas tax revenues are dwindling, and they're not going to be as reliable as they were in the past. Therefore, this major source of match funding that we've been utilizing for these years needs to be replaced. And so we can continue to deliver these federally funded projects. So it's our intention to leverage the federally funded projects with the SB1 funds. And then, addition to that, and the last item under the SB1 funds would be the line 86, which is capital projects. Again, roadway projects are an allowable expense under SB1 funding and makes up the majority of the SB1 spent across California. Therefore, the remaining funds identified in the revenue have been set aside for the capital projects. These projects are required to be adopted by resolutions and sent to the state. So ultimately, once these projects have been identified for the next fiscal year, staff will present that project list to council for your consideration and possible adoption.
Absolutely. No, I think on this last line with SB1 funds, I think it's important that for me, when we did the Measure L list, it was important to go after arteries and main corridors that are being used first, and then we kind of moved to smaller neighborhood streets. For SB1, in looking at the intent and maximizing the impact of the funds, I think it's important to look at areas that will enhance economic development, specifically some of the older areas and industrial areas just on the side of City Hall, predominantly because that equates to jobs and it equates to more redevelopment versus just people going out to the WISP area. That's just my take, and I encourage everyone on the council and anyone from the community to meet with staff as they start to create this and we bring it forward for resolution. Like you said, everything has to come to the council for adoption, but that's kind of where my mind goes with SB1 funds.
Yeah, and as we get there, those are the kinds of inputs that we're certainly going to need before we present it to council, so we have a good idea as to where we're going to go.
And this is also another caveat too. We've locked in our Measure L roads for the 25 years. There's roads on there though that now that we have another funding stream of SB1 potentially, we'll have to wrestle with and do it publicly about which ones do we remove from that to do for SB1, if we should do that or we keep it locked. So that's just something for public discussion that we'll have.
And it is a great point. You know, a year ago we could have had the same conversation, and there was no Measure L, and there was no SB1 essentially. You know, now that these funding sources are available, when Measure L was conceived, SB1 wasn't available to be there. So these items, the projects that are sitting out there in year 15, 20, whatever the year, you know, can we bring them forward with an SB1 fund?
Right, correct. So, thank you. Yes, Councilmember Scare.
Just a quick comment on the SB1 funds and the threat of it being repealed. I'd like to see us use as much as we can before that does happen, or if it comes at us. I would like to see a lot of these projects, the streets that are down at the bottom of 25-year list, we can move them up with SB1 money. Yeah, I'd say let's jump on that before we. I don't know that it will be repealed, but why take the chance?
I don't know if it will or will not either. However, I did note, just for information, that we did receive something from our, I think it was Mike Cook, sent something around for everybody that indicated they have 25% of the signatures necessary to put that on the November ballot at this point in time.
And I think it's important to note too that Stancog, which I'm the representative from the city of Turlock, SB1 funds, it was passed, and so they started accumulating, and there was just one pot of money for a local, or excuse me, one project in the Stanislaus County, and that's actually where we got almost $3 million for Folkerth, the road, the interchange, not the intersection, interchange. Now we've also gone out for the competitive pot of funds. Hopefully we'll get another $3 million, and that will shave off. That's almost $6 million that will shave off the 11, 12 million.
Yes.
And so we'll be going there, and that's locked in whether SB1 gets repealed or not.
That is funded at
Correct,
this point in time, and we will be seeing that project start construction this summer, actually.
Absolutely, great. Thank you so much. Yes,
Okay.
Councilmember DeHart.
Just for clarification purposes, I think in October, we had a deadline to submit projects. I can't remember if that was for this
That was
coming
for
year.
this fiscal year. We had submitted the projects for this fiscal year for
This
the
fiscal.
SB1 projects.
So that means up through.
Up through this year. The money that we're receiving from SB1 funds this year has been submitted. And
So
that was
it's
the
a short year.
That was the project that you listed, and it was a short year, yes.
Thank you.
Okay. Moving on to the Fund 228, excuse me. At line 87, the park master plan. Again, with the economy growing, this is something that, we're starting to have the various developers, query as to how our master plans are put together, are they updated, and these kinds of things. So in conjunction with some of the other items here with the planning consultants I mentioned earlier, we're currently anticipating carrying over 15,000 of the 25,000 budgeted for this fiscal year to next year. And additionally, we have an increase in the next year's budget to allow staff to continue to contract with this company, EPS, who does our public facilities financial accounting, to continue working on the Parks Fee Nexus study. This is, again, to keep the process moving, essentially keep the development engine running and running smoothly, essentially. We'll call it a maintenance project. As I've looked into this particular study, it's old, it needs to be updated. And, so we don't want to have the developers give us some questions that we are not able to answer just because of something's it might be out of date. Again, tied to that, line 88 actually is associated with that same item. We're carrying over 4,000 of the original $9,500 on that project also. Moving on down into Fund 240, 241, asset replacements. Again, this is just a simple item, but we don't have the need for replacing our scanner in the planning department at line 90. So we're not going to replace it at this point in time. We'll get another year out of it. So we're just pushing that off till next year. Now, in Fund 425, it's the transit fixed route system. We're trying to do some other changes in there, and this is part of we have long-term plans here with transit's new facility under construction out there. The transit manager will actually be residing out there. At this point in time, the transit manager also happens to be the traffic transportation supervisor. So we have some things that are actually going to occur within the engineering division related to traffic and transit, and this bifurcation that's going to occur, we're going to have to deal with it in some fashion. So the current allocation is currently held in 502, and the justification then we discussed here in a minute here at line 104. Again, related transit, the Pedretti parking lot was once heavily supported through the transit system because the transit system actually utilizes the Pedretti Park. So through a transfer of funds, at this point in time, that transfer was based on the utilization. However, that utilization no longer is occurring. So the nexus of that expenditure is no longer available. So we're just, that's the idea of taking care of that particular expense. Fixed route expenses, again, that's the item 97 that I'm going to relate to here in just a moment here at line 104 under the engineering revenue. So I'll just go ahead and move into engineering revenue itself. Line 98 is actually an important item. It seems minor, but what we're trying to do is make the accounting of the Measure L projects work as best as possible. Originally, there was accounts created for Measure L funded employees, and with a council resolution, we moved that all over into the 502. And this allows the accounting systems to actually function better. So when a Measure L employee that was hired under that charges directly to the Measure L funds, this is a way in which we can account things more efficiently. In the event that they're actually working on some other projects, they're being paid through those particular projects. And that's exactly how the engineering department functions in its daily business. Every engineer down in the department keeps track of every moment of time. They keep actual timesheets. We have a timesheet program for whatever project they're working on, so we can charge these things as appropriate. Okay, so let's see. And that has related to the adoption of the various budgets. Okay, lines 101 and 102, we want to replace the development services supervisor with a surveyor with a principal civil engineer. Now, what I'm trying to do with this particular one, these are some adjustments we're trying to do, is actually we want to elevate one position and actually demote another position, not as personnel, but actually I'm talking dollar-wise here. So the basic exchange between these two personnel and dollar-wise as far as the budget concerns, is actually an overall savings. And we're expecting a savings by elevating and changing those positions, savings about $47,000 to the engineering fund. What we had before is our surveyor was more of a manager and did less surveying. So the intention is when we replace that particular surveyor, we're going to have a surveyor that spends more time in the field actually surveying. So that's why there's a cost savings there. Let's see. I think they kind of hit that one there. And then I want to, line 103, I want to replace the traffic transportation supervisor with the transit manager. So right now, as I kind of alluded to earlier, that traffic transportation supervisor who resides downstairs has those two jobs will be leaving. So I want to take that position and create just the transit supervisor. The transit supervisor will be wholly paid through the transit funds. So we're going to have that particular position come out of the Fund 502, the engineering account, and be totally supported with the transit funds itself. So currently, that position is being funded 30% engineering, 35% fixed route transit, 35% dial-a-ride. The long-term plan with this would be 75% would pay for transit fixed route and 25% on the 425, which is the dial-a-ride. So the idea is then to take that particular expense completely out of engineering and support it wholly again through transit. Now here's actually line 104 is the one I've been kind of working my way towards here. It has to do with a new position. This is the only new position I actually wanted to discuss, and however I think it's a very important position to discuss. With that removal of the traffic transportation supervisor out of engineering, we will not have any dedicated staff to the idea of traffic engineering. Traffic engineering actually has been a collateral duty of the engineering department since 2009, and it has not been significantly supported in any particular way through funding. We do currently get about $50,000 of general funding for this position. However, the tasks that come to us through the various requests from the public or from council or whatever form are completed on a pretty much an as-needed basis. And they're only as time permits. So we really don't have that full-time focus on the ideas of the various kinds of studies that we need to complete, whether they're stop sign requests for multiple stop signs or a single stop sign, red line striping, or red curb striping rather, the various striping changes that maybe you might see occur possibly over here on Hedstrom's, like over there next to Starbucks we did there. All these various requests have a need, and they're as far as the basic effect of the community. And right now, the ability of the engineering department to support these requests is very limited in the amount of staff that we have to take care of that. At one time, in 2005, 2006, we actually had 2 traffic technicians. At this point in time, we barely have half. And so the community has not gotten any smaller. And so this is one of those kind of ideas that we just need to take care of. Other items that they take care of are signal timing. So we're continually modifying the signal systems, compliance with the various regulations for collision strategy is one of the items that this particular individual will be taking care of. So these are all items that are not the items of special interest, but these are items of interest to the entire community. And this is something that's going to affect every individual that drives on any particular road throughout the community. And that's why I really have a serious need for this particular position to be ultimately funded. So that's kind of where I'm on that one. Another position that I'm looking towards actually changing the position is a staff service assistant to a staff services analyst. This is in our development portion of our engineering division. This particular individual I have working in there is currently working out a class, and so I'm just trying to make the position actually function better with the particular staff. So there is a cost associated with that. Part-time help. This is a simple item, but we've expended a lot more part-time help than we thought we would normally have put through the projects. That has again to do with the fact that our development has been slowly increasing, As you can look forward to this year, we have a couple of subdivisions currently under construction. I have some conversations with some developers regarding other subdivisions. I'm actually anticipating another good-sized subdivision to possibly start sometime this summer. So this is why we have these particular needs. Related to the surveyor comment, I'm down to line 108 at this point in time. Looking for a consulting city surveyor. As part of what we do within the city, a development has a set of maps that have to go get approved, and they have to be reviewed by a city surveyor and then certified before they're recorded. With the departure of our city surveyor back in July, we've been utilizing consultant services for this purpose, and we need to continue with those same consultant services. This is, again, just part of the basic development services that we supply the developers for them to get their projects completed. And then the last item that I have is item 109, and that has our telephone data plan. It's actually, I think it's probably citywide how the data plans are continually changing. The way that the engineering department utilizes the data plan is we are using the iPads now for inspection services. We have a purchase software which we utilize for our project management, so the inspectors have the ability to upload pictures to our project management software, communicate directly and in writing with our various contractors. So this particular software that we utilize has saved us significant amount of monies regarding change orders, just because we keep things well documented. And because of that, the iPad use is being utilized. It's just growing. So that's the very basic item of why our data plan needs to increase. These are not phone conversations. These are actually just use of data. And I am prepared for questions.
Any questions for Eric? Yes, Councilmember DeHart.
How long, Eric, have we been dealing with half or a quarter of a traffic engineer? I forgot what you said.
About 2006 when we had the layoffs. So it's been quite some time, and so we have a serious backlog in the studies that people have requested. What we do is basically we triage them as they come in. Is how important is this request relative to the community? Is it a stop sign request? Can we see some validation to it, just as through our utilizing basic engineering judgment? Is this something important, or is this something that maybe is not really important? Somebody just has a desire because that's the way they travel to work and they would like to see a stop sign there. So we do triage them at this point in time, but however, we do have a serious backlog.
Does this person or this individual also conduct studies having to do with speed limits?
The speed limit studies would be part of it. Yes, if we have specific speed limit studies, and that's actually, we're going to be discussing that probably at a future date. In the next 2 years, we're going to have to do our speed studies. Speed studies are actually, for the entire community, are done every 7 years. In about 2 years, we're going to be having to start our speed study again. The last time we did one of those, the full community speed study, we had help from the police department. They put a lot of effort into that. Prior to that, we had done it in-house. It's a significant project, and this is actually something we're probably going to want to budget for and plan on utilize actually an outside consultant. But for the basic speed studies, we do have the equipment, and that individual would be able to look at a section of road that maybe needed a review, but that'd be that person. That is correct.
So it's got a component in terms of their responsibilities that very definitely is connected to public safety.
Oh, absolutely.
And I think that that's another, well, it's an item, it's another item, it's the item, whatever, that at least from your perspective, from your department, has almost a crisis type.
And this is why I'm really pushing this item. This is the only item of it as far as new positions that I really wanted to bring up at this point in time, and that's why I feel it's very important that we discuss it.
I think anytime we start managing by crisis prevention and the immediate need, how soon do we get how many people do we lose before we get a stoplight type of approach is really what we're talking
Yeah,
about.
and this is absolutely that basic safety of stoplights, stop signs, and the timing of stoplights. This individual actually would be the person that would manage and maintain the various changes in the timing of stoplights.
Thanks.
Thank you so much, Eric.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Next is Director Van Gilder, I believe. Yes.
Yeah. Thank you very much, Jennifer. Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. I'm here to present to you the Parks, Recreation, and Public Facilities augmentation requests for both fiscal year 17-18 and 18-19. I've put together a presentation really just sort of highlighting the more significant, I think, requests that we're putting together. As you know, there's MOU roll-ups and things like that. I'm not going to be touching on those. But if there's anything that you have questions on that I don't cover that are in your list, please let me know. So coming off of what Director Pisciano just mentioned in regard to SB1 funds, we feel that this is a very unique opportunity for council to consider. When this funding originally came to be, it was understood by staff that that funding was supposed to be primarily for major public works projects. And so, of course, those of us in the maintenance area were quite interested to see if there would be any opportunities to help enhance what we were already trying to do in that area. Unfortunately, at that time, it was understood, like I said, that this was just for projects. Well, since then, we have had staff take another look at that based on some activities that we know are taking place at other communities around us, where those funds are in fact being used for maintenance efforts. And so, you know, we think it broadens the opportunity for council to consider that in addition to major projects, that maybe there's an opportunity to take a multi-pronged approach where not only are we taking care of long overdue major construction, but we're also hitting it on a daily basis with our pothole repairs and our thermo work, which Director Pisciano mentioned. And so listed here is just sort of a quick summary of what we would be proposing council to consider with using a portion of those SB1 revenue funds for some of these maintenance-related expenditures. So what we're looking at is 2 maintenance worker 1-2 positions. That would obviously be an ongoing cost, something for council to be aware of. To get us set up with what we would primarily use as a second pothole crew, we would need a hot mix trailer. We would also need to budget for material every year, and that would obviously be an ongoing expenditure. The other opportunity that we see here is we could utilize these positions to also perform the thermoplastic maintenance work. What you need to know at this point is the city has adopted a standard where anytime we go in and make road improvements, generally speaking, what the contractor uses is a thermoplastic. So that's where you get all these high visibility crosswalks, they pop. We know that they have a much longer lifespan. Today, when we as maintenance staff are asked to go out and replace thermo, or like, for example, on Lander, create the high visibility crosswalks, we do not have the adequate equipment to do so. What we have currently is a couple of torches that we utilize to do very small minor jobs. It was primarily, sort of a test, if you will, when, as we were getting more familiar with this product. But our tried and true approach every day of the year is paint. And we know that paint has a much shorter lifespan. And so as we have adopted this as our standard, it's been a concern of mine that, you know, when the work orders start coming my way and I have to then, you know, put them out to my staff, we're very limited. And so we could see ourselves at some point in the very near future basically having to paint over thermo. And then we're right back to square one where we lose that efficiency, we lose that lifespan. And so this to me is a unique opportunity to be able to set ourselves up with the appropriate equipment. We would also obviously have some staff to be able to dedicate to that, and I really think helps fill a gap that we currently don't have a solution for. I greatly appreciate council's consideration of this request. You know, obviously we've given you a couple of options, but you know, I'm open to any conversations about, you know, maybe it's this year, maybe it's this next year. These are two critical issues that I think need to be evaluated by council. So just some quick stats on our potholes, since in my world, we hear about this every day, which I know many of you do as well. Between March of 2017 and March of 2018, my staff responded to 684 pothole work orders. That equates to about a little over 2,800 actual potholes filled and a little over 13,000 square feet of roadway. What we anticipate, if we were to be able to add a second crew, we could actually double the number of potholes addressed. And that's because currently we have our large patch truck. There's a lot of setup involved with that type of rig. It is not the most efficient process. I know Councilmember Esquer, you came out and spent some time with us and kind of saw what it takes. Between that and just the general safety measures that have to be taken prior to us working in the road, it's not a quick process. However, with a trailer, we would be able to be much more nimble to come in and set up more quickly, and essentially we would be having this activity happening simultaneously in more than one area of the city every day that we had, you know, decent weather and material available. The thought about adding the second pothole crew would be that we could essentially have our patch truck crew focus on our major thoroughfares, and then what we would be able to do with this new crew is have them focus on our neighborhoods. Right now, with one crew, we are managing by fire, and you know what that means. We have an ongoing list that as we get reports of things, we can add them to the list, and our crews do their very best every day to chip away at that list. But a lot of times we are responding to calls that come in, and we're trying to prioritize hazard and risk. This would allow us to be much more proactive than we are today. I spoke about thermo. I think that this would be something that would set us in a position where we would have an answer to how to maintain your investment that you've made in these major roadwork projects. Right now, I don't have an answer for you. It would basically be we need to go back out to contract in order to maintain the thermo. And we know that we can do it much more quickly and more efficiently. So this is just a quick little example of a before and after. This is the torch method I was talking about. It's not a real progressive system. It's basically a propane tank with a hose and attached torch, but it gives us a really nice finish, and it lasts much, much longer than regular old paint. Moving into our other augmentation requests, this is relevant to augmentations 111, 114, and 124. It's really just a modest increase to our existing tree trimming contract. This is for all of our parks, facilities, and our medians. And so with that, as you know, we want to try and maintain the health of our urban forests, but primarily we try to do it for safety and liability reasons. Park enhancements. This is probably, I think, the largest impact that we're asking council to consider. And what we are asking is the addition of 2 park maintenance workers to our current staffing levels. Right now, we are currently staffed with 8.5 full-time equivalent positions. There was a mention earlier of the recent update to our CFD. And through that process, there are comparisons made to other communities of similar size and population. And what we found through that process is that the average community compared to us has about 16 full-time equivalents. So it's obviously we're quite behind the game, if you will. And so we feel like it's reasonable that we would, a city of our size and with the number of parks and amenities that we're trying to maintain, that we look at investing in this particular area. I've listed some park stats there for everybody just to kind of have a quick reference. Based on our current park acreage and the number of staff that we have, that's about 10 acres per employee to maintain. And I think the key things to remember here is that, Turlock's, has many attributes that we take great pride in, but I think everyone will agree that our parks are just kind of one of those things that, everybody can kind of relate to and connect with. And, we look at our parks kind of as our community curb appeal, if you will. You can tell a lot from a community based on the condition of their parks. And I know that my staff has had many challenges over the years, especially with the drought. We've struggled, but they have worked very, very hard to try and maintain a quality that the community has come to expect. What I will tell you is that we have a very engaged community that cares greatly about our parks. And if something is not being maintained to a level that they expect, they let us know about it, and we appreciate it. What happens with that, though, is many times we are managing in a more reactive way. We're unable to be as proactive as we'd like to be. And so I think with the addition of the 2 positions, you would see an ability to be more proactive. You would see an ability for us to deal with some of these, aesthetic issues, because frankly, right now, we are managing safety, we are managing health hazards. Those are our priorities every day. So what gets bumped down on the list, that lawn may not get mowed as frequently as people expect it to be. But we make sure that the playgrounds are checked for safety hazards. We make sure the trash is picked up, things of that nature. And so when we think about, what this infusion of support, what it would do for us, I think it would help us to allow us to be more proactive. One of the items that's also listed in our request is promotion from an existing staff person to the next level in their classification. We also have a struggle with retaining employees. We also had the retirement of a key staff person, and so what we're really trying to do here is invest in our existing employees who have expressed an interest in wanting to stay with the organization, who have taken on additional tasks, who we are utilizing in ways that are sometimes elevated above their pay grade. And so we see an opportunity here to invest in an existing staff as part of our succession plan. Full-time event coordinator. Council, a couple years ago, you had the foresight to recognize the value of creating a unique part-time event coordinator position. This was in regard to some of the changes that had taken place with the CVB. It was also in connection with our special event revamp process. And I have to tell you that I think that was a very thoughtful decision, and I know that the city, all of the departments, have actually benefited from that decision. What we have seen with creating that single point of contact for our special event process is much more efficiencies. From a customer service standpoint, they're not having to go to the police department and get something from them and then go to the traffic engineering and get that approval. They deal with one person. We have a committee meeting that evaluates all of the events. We've had some bumps with the process, but I think that we have addressed those, and I think every time we've gotten more and more efficient. I believe that we have elevated the confidence of the stakeholders in our community because we have been responsive to them and their concerns about street closures and impacts that our special events have on them. And so I think it's time, based on the experience that we've had over the last couple of years, that it would be wise for us to consider making this a full-time position. I think that there is opportunity here. Currently, we're limited to 20 hours a week with this individual, so from a customer service standpoint, it's challenging sometimes because we don't always know when customers are gonna need assistance and come into the office and we have to say, oh, sorry, that person's off today. And so we know that we've been averaging about 30 special events every year, and many of them come before you because they involve street closures. There's a lot of planning that goes into it. This person is able to be, that single point of contact to work through issues, to also anticipate issues based on their experience. And so much of this position relies on relationships. And so when you have the same person kind of working with everyone and building that relationship over time, when we need to make changes, because this is an annual event or a regularly occurring event, we just see a lot more teamwork that takes place, and I feel like we deliver a better end product. And so not only would this person in a full-time capacity be responsible for the special event process, but we are also using them to manage our community and activities grant, which we know is a very important part of our tourism effort. And I see great potential in being able to utilize this position to take on any initiatives that come out of our marketing and branding strategies. There's also, I believe, an opportunity to utilize them to focus on our sports facilities and complexes in order to really maximize the activities that are taking place at those locations. I appreciate your consideration of this request. I see an opportunity to offset this position. As you know, the part-time position is currently funded out of the tourism fund. I see an opportunity to split that cost with tourism and also our general fund budget in the sports programming area, where we know we have revenue that offsets that. So something for council to consider, and I'd be happy to answer any questions about that. These are some minor, what I would refer to as housekeeping items. We've had a need to relocate our dance program, and so the expenses associated with the rental of the Turlock Community Theater, we need to make some budget adjustments, but the good news is the revenue that comes in for that dance program covers those costs. Same thing for our aquatics program. We also have some additional increases in the cost of staffing relative to our concessions, but we anticipate that being offset by revenue for that program. And then this is a unique partnership that we have with our police department. It's our PAL program. This is actually a housekeeping item so that we can expend for supplies and things of that nature relative to the program. It's basically creating a line number in our budget for that purpose. However, all of these expenses are offset by a transfer from the PAL program, which is a separate entity. And finally, I would ask council to reference their document in regard to capital improvement. These particular items are projects that I want you to be aware of. Last year, I had made council aware that Rotary Park's playground structure is in need of replacement. It's over 25 years old, and we are unable to find replacement parts for it due to the construction and having a square post where the new construction or the new playgrounds all use a round post. And so it's reasonable that at some point we may have to take that out of use. The good news is staff has been successful in obtaining a grant for this particular location, but we are still short some funding for that to the tune of well, we've reduced the cost. We do hope to reach out to our community. This, as I mentioned, this is at Rotary Park. It would be our hope that maybe there could be some partnerships there to help offset that. We are working in that direction, but I wanted to make sure that council knew this was still an area that we have not addressed. But we have, like I said, we've got some apparent success with obtaining a grant, and we plan to bring that to you for acceptance in the near future. There is one, I'm sorry, oh, here we go. The next project that I want to make you aware of, and we all know that Columbia Pool and that entire facility is coming, I think, to the end of its useful life. And I think it needs some love and it needs some investment and attention. And what I'm asking you right now is to consider earmarking some funding to really do a close evaluation of that facility and evaluate what we can do to bring that facility back up to par so that it's useful for many, many years to come. I know that we have the results from our feasibility study, our recreation feasibility study. We know that the idea of a brand new aquatics facility is a bit overwhelming. And I would propose that we start with our existing facility to really evaluate what can we do to invest. And it's clear to me though that we want that type of facility in that community, and I think there are many stakeholders that would agree with that, and so that's something for you to consider. There's another additional item that didn't make it into the slides, and it's a request for $28,000 to maintain a portion of the flat roof at the senior center. Like Chief Carlson mentioned, we are also having issues with leaks, and so that was in the request for last year, like I said, to the tune of $28,000. We're asking council to consider that request as well. And then following that, I believe there are just some supply costs in the storm basin maintenance line number. That is not general fund, but we perform that service for municipal services, and so there's just some minor housekeeping with some additional supplies and things of that nature. With that, I would be happy to answer any questions that you might have.
Thank you, Allison. Any additional questions? Have you, on the last one, go back one slide to Columbia Pool, have you explored, or are we open to exploring partnerships with other individuals, other agencies, other companies in the rehab of Columbia Pool?
Absolutely, we are interested in partnering. I think what we need to do though, before we can really go in that direction, is understand what our challenges are in terms of ADA improvements, and we know that just the plastering of the pool itself is starting to crumble. And so, we had originally sort of trying to take this maintenance approach where like, oh, let's budget, a little here and take care of this, and then a little here and but we took a step back and said, there's just so many things that we need to do to this facility. The restrooms, the locker room areas. I mean, anybody who's been there knows it could definitely use an update. And so anytime you start talking about those types of updates, we know that there's a certain threshold in terms of cost that's going to then trigger all of these ADA improvements. And so we think a comprehensive evaluation is the best place to start. Admittedly, this is an earmark. We know that we have an architect on retainer that we could potentially work with. I don't have an actual estimate at this particular point, but in working with engineering staff, we think this is kind of a good round number, if you will. It's really just to open the door and start having that conversation with all of you that this is on the horizon and we want to try and get ahead of it. And so once we know sort of where we stand and what are the key things that need to be improved, I think that's when we start reaching out to the potential partners that want to work with us on that project.
Thank you. Any additional questions or comments for Allison from the audience or the council? Yes.
Just in reference to the pool, wouldn't it just be easier to put out some bids and ask for estimates about how much it would cost to update it? Because they'd have to know what ADA compliance is and things of that nature, and then we could go from there, and then money was already, that $47,000 just goes into actually doing the job. Could we do that possibly?
I think we can. I think it's, sort of what, we know we have an architect on retainer, and I think we're just trying to get some professional guidance to know what we're looking at. And at this particular point, I would say we're not even dreaming big. We're trying to maintain what we have. Obviously, we'd have to bring it up to code in certain ways, but this is really just to try and invest in and maintain our investment, if you will. I think there's opportunity to discuss with council if we want to kind of come back and tackle that in a different way. I'd love to have that conversation. Okay.
Any additional questions or comments? Okay, thank you so much, Allison.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the next section, we are going to take a quick 5-minute break, and we'll be back. Thanks.
To a black screen.
should've got, that would've been good. That would've been good. When your turn came, you'd pass out donuts. Then now it'd go, just tell them you're not typecasting. How are you?
Gary, are you up?
I think so.
Oh, sorry.
You know, and and the way I would say it,
If everyone wants to take their seats, we'll get started. All right, let's get started. We'll bring this meeting back to order. Chief Carlson.
Mayor, Mayor, Council, thank you. Sorry about that.
That was intense.
So for my augmentation request, I'll be referring to this packet that you all should have in front of you. So foregoing the first two that had to do with the MOU contractual stuff, I didn't really address those. The first one I'd like to address would be item 136 on your spreadsheet, the request for 3 firefighters to be added to our ranks. Reasoning behind that kind of starts, well, ways back. I believe it was 2006, council took added a firefighter to our engine companies. Previously, we had 2 per engine, and in 2006, they made the move to go to 3 per engine company. And at that time, made the commitment to have a daily minimum staffing level of 13. So 3 on each of our 4 engines with the battalion chief overseeing. And throughout the recession and everything, council adhered to that. So this is where we're basing what our daily minimum staffing is each day. So each day you'll have a battalion chief, 4 captains on duty, 4 engineers, and 4 firefighters. So our total budget staffing positions right now consist of 45 line personnel. So there's 3 battalion chiefs, 15 captains, 15 engineers, and 12 firefighters. And the reason we have 12 firefighters rather than 15 was because generally overtime is cheaper to hire back a firefighter position than it is to have a budgeted position. And the difference in that is somewhere around $160,000. But as the firefighters gain seniority and move up in steps, that gap closes. What we're experiencing now is a level of, I'd say, firefighter fatigue in our ranks. We have some firefighters and engineers working in excess of 2,000 hours overtime a year. So when we do when you have a firefighter or somebody that's on duty for their third day in a row, fourth day in a row, fifth day in a row, sixth day in a row, their level of, of acuteness kind of could go down. When you're up several nights in a row, you need to maintain a very professional and sharp, ready to go, as the firefighter you need to be. So asking for these 3 firefighters would help to alleviate some of those fatigue issues and overtime issues. Also, with the advent of the OES engine, we were seeing crews go out for several weeks at a time on wildland incidents, and we staff those with 4, and we're having a harder time getting people to come back. And we have to resort to mandating people more and more. So while it is an increase to obviously the overall general budget, adding 3 of these positions, we could use it as an offset to some of the overtime costs. So if we were to look, this line kind of directly ties to number 139 on your list would be the overtime standard, which is what we use to backfill those firefighter positions, as well as cover for every time somebody's on vacation, holiday, has an injury, or uses comp time. So the way I wrote this up, I left them both in there. So if you look at our total augmentation requests over $1 million a year, it's kind of an either or thing right now if we were to leave minimum staffing level at 13. If you were to approve the 3 firefighter positions, I would need the extra $130,000 in overtime standard. However, if you don't, I will need that. And reasons for, I guess, skipping ahead to the overtime standard are, as you'll see in this sheet after the overtime standard, since 2013-14, when I started tracking, our overtime has been in excess of $560,000 each year, yet our line for that has been $500,000. So it's been set up to fail from the beginning. As you get into 16, 17, 17, 18, we have vacancies now. We've had 4 people leave for other departments. And so I've been using salary savings to so we don't go over in that total cost. However, this year, at 2017-18, with the MOU, the firefighters have an adjustment. They were getting stipends, now they are getting an increased salary schedule, so that increases the overtime costs. So with that, at the current budgeted positions we have, we will need $630,000 just to maintain our minimum staffing levels that the council has always adhered to. So, sorry, I'll stop right there. Is there any, I know it's a little confusing on how one or the other. Is there a question on Councilmember Jacobs?
I'm seeing 6 positions. I know we haven't gotten to the second 3.
Right.
But do you anticipate if we were to approve these positions that we could potentially dip below that 500,000 that we're budgeting for overtime? Or are we just
I think it's going to be
130?
right at about that is what I think if we had the 3 extra positions with the new MOU COLAs that the firefighters have, I think it would be my best estimation right at about $500,000 and about $630,000 without them. But then again, it's impossible to say because the way we run minimum staffing, if an engineer calls in sick and we can't find another engineer, we'll hire back with a captain, which is a higher rate. So the overtime rate is not something total overtime cost is not something I can, it's impossible to.
Approximately, though, every 3 firefighters results in about 130,000.
That's what the
savings
increase
in
to the overtime cost will be based on the contract and the fact that it's been underfunded for the last 5 or 6 years. Councilmember.
Does this overtime also take into place us sending people to other areas of the state?
I'm sorry.
So if we send one of our firefighters, excuse me, down south to fight a fire to help with it, then are we incurring that expense, or is that in this?
No, that's not in this because that's, we get 100%, actually 110% back from the state. But reimbursement, it does take several months to get the money back from the state, but it does come through. So that's why that's not in there. Any other questions on those 2 sections? Okay. Movement on. Back in order to 137. No, the other 3 firefighters I have listed on here. Left them separately. That was, in conjunction with the ladder truck staffing plan that is on the back tab of your handout. I know staffing the truck has been an ongoing challenge. The truck we purchased in 2001, so we have had access to the truck now for 17 years. There's been attempts to get it staffed, and then when the recession hit in 2007, our numbers began to climb and brought it back down. So at the direction of the current city manager, past city manager, and the mayor's, we've come up with a plan to get the truck staffed. And it's listed in the very last 2 pages under the truck cost savings staffing plan. And this would be to implement phase 1, which would be to hire an additional 3 firefighters. It's broken out into 4 phases. It could be 4 years or whatever council felt comfortable. Under phase 1, we would hire an additional 3 firefighters, bring our minimum staffing level up to 14. And for the first year, it would not staff the truck. They would be placed on the squad, which does some duties similar to the truck, but not quite. And it would give us a chance to get people ready to promote. As we staffed a new piece of apparatus, we would need a captain, engineer, and firefighter. Firefighters we can do. Engineers, we're having a hard time finding engineers because of the turnover we have and losing firefighters to other departments. They'll come here, they've been here for 2 or 3 years, they're getting ready to promote, and then they'll be attracted away to another department, which is currently we are in the process of hiring 4 new firefighters because that just happened. So this would give us some time to put the plan into place, get people ready to promote, and then as we moved on to phase 2 of the plan, we would be able to get the truck on the road in some form or another, whether it's staffed with 3 and 2 on the engine running tandem. As we built all the way out to phase 4, which would be a fully staffed 4-person truck company, which is what's recommended by NFPA. Understand that's nothing in our augmentation plan I would consider fluff at all. This is just something that has been a goal for 17 years that at some point we need to move forward with. So I would love to hear you say, let's just staff the truck now, and you'd give us $1.7 million, and we would go after it. Candidly, it would take us about 6 to 8 months to get that, even once you said, from the day you said go, to get it staffed based on having to get promotions and the right people in place. So I think this 4-phase plan makes sense. Moving on to 138, deputy fire marshal position. I heard very first this morning we talked about Jennifer Land's position and the need to have somebody that knows how to do her job. And as we've brought up in the past, and I know I've had discussions with Councilmember Bublak, Chief Gomez is the one person in this department that we don't have that redundancy for. He is our prevention division. If you look through the handouts, that org chart that the mayor commented on it, the one of our prevention division, it just has one box, and it's the fire marshal. If Chief Gomez was to leave, we would have a severe problem moving forward, and it would not only affect us, but it would affect developmental services and everything else. So I don't know Chief Gomez's timeline, but as it stands, he has to have time off sometimes and things slow down. He's the only person that we have to do this. We need a succession plan for Chief Gomez and somebody that can carry the torch, because there needs to be a seamless transition when he does decide to leave. So at some point, this deputy fire marshal position is something we have to look at. We do currently have somebody shadowing him 2 days a week, thanks to some money we found with Captain Bickle. He's learning a lot. He's speeding up the times it takes for turnaround with Chief Gomez, but that's a finite amount of money that we have. And once that goes, we'll be back to figuring out the next plan. Mayor?
Vice Mayor.
Sorry, to go back to the ladder truck, can you just talk to us a little bit more about why the need exists, what it will help us accomplish?
Sure. A ladder truck differs.
And for the community as well.
Absolutely. A ladder truck differs than an engine in that engines carry water, put out fires. Ladder trucks do specifically other things. For example, the ventilation. Currently, ladders on our engines, we do not have the ability to get on a roof of anything over 2 stories. And in the north side, the ladders we carry, we can't even get on the roofs to vent the roofs on the north side of town. With the newly constructed Vista Apartments, Silvercrest It's a 3-story facility that gave me nightmares as a battalion chief. We specifically don't have the capabilities without a ladder truck to safely mitigate those types of emergencies. Now, I'm not gonna tell you that if you don't staff the ladder truck, people are gonna die, but this is a very specific tool that cities of our size generally have a staffed ladder truck. In addition to doing that, ladder truck companies specifically focus on search for trapped trapped occupants, forcible entry. They're the specialists of the department. And as the city continues to grow with the commercial areas, you know, the big footprinted warehouses, and those are generally just high rises on their side. To be able to safely mitigate emergencies there, this is a piece of equipment that we have, and it's remained on staff for 17 years. I think we'll probably have other people getting up speaking to that, I'm guessing, as we get to it, but did I kind of answer your question? Okay.
In reference to the fire marshal and having somebody shadow him, can we also, in the next couple of meetings we have, kind of do analyze it, how much it's helped, how many more, from when he was just doing the permits to having somebody secondary, so that we can see
The benefits?
logic? Yes.
Absolutely. Okay, so move on to items 140, 141, 142, 143, basic 144, our training. Secondary to responding to emergencies, training is the most important thing that firefighters do. They wear so many hats, they have to be ready for so many things, and it's really become, firefighting's become specialized in a lot of different areas. It's not just going to fighting fires anymore, going to medical calls. You know, there are some complex extrications. We have technical rescue, hazmat. And so the need for training is paramount, especially as now we are bringing in more people, they're younger. It takes quite a long time to be proficient in everything, and nobody can be proficient in everything, which is why we have specialists within our department that train the other members of our department in certain areas. Our training budget has been so meager for as long as I can remember. Things are just falling by the wayside. What I'm talking about is, you know, the cost to have our hazmat specialists, Captain Forsyth back there, teach the other crews, because he's on one shift, the other crews that we need to pay him to come back on overtime to teach the other crews so that they can mitigate incidents, since he's only on 1/3 of the time. That being, going along with that, you know, contracting out subject matter experts in different areas to bring them in to teach us everything from technical rescues to new techniques in firefighting, high rise, as we become more of those. And then the supplies, just the perishable supplies that we need, you know, such as OSB and training materials. Training is, I can't emphasize enough how important training is to our department. And an ancillary thing is, as I mentioned earlier, retaining personnel. You know, I know we're not gonna get into the salaries or anything like that, but, you know, they're attracted by bigger departments to do more things. And training is a great motivator. So the more training that we have and are able to offer and specialize things, it improves morale and entices people to stay. And it's you know, rather than continuing to lose people and train people, we can specialize people. So all those kind of go along with that in the trade. Yes, sir, Mr. Dart.
Thanks very much, Chief, so far. I just, comment about Captain Forsyth kind of sparked something in my brain, because I think, you know, we have a lot of specialty sorts of things that specialty sorts of people provide to our firefighters. And I'm just wondering what kind of, we've talked about succession planning as a need. What about cross-training? What about not having more than one person certified for a particular function? I think one of the challenges that we're gonna end up facing here before too very long is when Captain Forsyth is gone, and he's only there 1/3 of the time. Who else is like pulling that PFP or whatever it is to say, okay, I can step up. or I can step up so that the other 2/3 are covered. You talked hazmat, okay? What about your self-contained breathing, your SCBA's? What about replacing minor parts on engines? That list goes on.
No, you're right. You're absolutely right, and we do that. I mentioned Captain Forsyth because I saw him here earlier, but we do have, we're able to bolster our numbers in hazmat. He just happens to be the team leader. I think we're up to 7 hazmat members now. We do have an apprentice to Captain Harkson that is learning to, with the apparatus maintenance side of it. So we do that as far as redundancy. Going back to the one position we don't have that really in effect would be Chief Gomez's position. We have a little bit of that now, but not to the extent we would need it. But yes, we do that. We try to have one, at least one isn't even enough per shift. Everybody's, when you call 911, you expect, there's a saying that you want 4 decathlete brain surgeons to come up and solve all your problems, not just, 2 old firefighters in a pickup truck looking around. So we try to train everybody up to these levels, but some things are so specialized that there's only a few in the department that take it upon themselves to get there. And that's how we rely on it.
I guess one additional point and then a question is, we have individuals like Harkson who are very capable at doing mech work. Who else do we have that can do mech work? In other words, the purpose of the question is, it seems to me that we have units that end up at Burton's for extended periods of time for the most insignificant pieces, when if we had access to those pieces and we had more than one person, I would assume, he's there more than 1/3, I would assume, but I won't assume anymore.
Yeah.
Can we, do you have latitude to assign PFP pay for these guys to pick up that cert, or how does that work?
There is some PFP pay for that, and in fact, when you see them at Burton's, they're usually there because of something that is either warranty work or beyond our capabilities. You don't see the amount of time that, it's not only Captain Harkson, Engineer Bicchetti, Engineer Boyd, and Captain Mallory are the other 3 that constantly are fixing things on our engine. So it does happen, but when you see them up there, it's based more on warranty work or some complex pump issue that we can't just fix. So we do have that, and they do a wonderful job for what we can't have them do.
Okay, thanks.
So, absolutely. Were there any questions on the training augmentation request I had? Okay. So the next one, 142, fire station maintenance. And we touched on that a little bit earlier. Kelly brought that up as far as the roofs leaking at the stations. Since I took over the budget, I realized we never had a line item to fix any of the operational station issues that we come up against. And actually, I was researching back why with Allison was helping me out, and I guess what happened was in the past, and I'm talking when Allison worked for fire, if we had an issue, we would come to council and they would do an augmentation at that point. But it's gotten to the point, that these things just keep happening as the stations get older. Not just the roof repairs, but the bay doors going up and down all the time need to be, parts on them, the springs break, parts need to be fixed, water heater repairs. So at the beginning of this year, when we met with the previous city manager, he established a line for facility maintenance for us to be able to handle this, but then it wasn't funded. So we currently have these needs, the operational needs that don't gravitate to the capital improvement area. These are just operational fixes and no funds to be able to solve them. So that's what this request for this $20,000 would be, just to fix those things that come up as far as doors, roofs, small things. So, any questions on that? No? Okay. Sorry. Lastly, and this is kind of a bigger one. We've talked about the 240 and the 506 accounts, the fire's equipment replacement accounts, and to be honest, we first kind of the institutional knowledge with fire in these accounts kind of was just found. And I think the mayor happened to be having Christmas dinner with one of the stations one day when this was coming about, and when we lost one of the previous chiefs, and everybody that had something to do with this was gone, and so we really had no idea what this was. So as we delved through it and realized, that there was this already planned for equipment replacement issues, got a copy of what was requested by fire, which is represented in attachment in the C for yours. And I think if you look at it, there's some things on there that are covered, but as we went through, what we realized, when you go to attachment D, these are all the things that should have been covered. And it's just monumentally underfunded. In addition to what was funded, it was grossly under and estimated what the cost would be. So they were putting aside $400,000 for a fire engine. Well, fire engines are about $750,000. They had the exhaust systems in here, which we're very thankful, and we got done, but they came in over cost. The command vehicles, all these things that fire needs, as well as, we need fire engines, we need command vehicles, things that we just, our fund is not going to be able to be solvent to be able to buy all these things. And interesting, the consent calendar item that was pulled by Councilmember DeHart and the chief of police talked about how it was funded, all the money was funded for the replacement police vehicles and this and that, and the reasons why that they become outdated. Well, our backup command vehicle is a police vehicle that they were gonna throw away that we repurposed, I believe it's a 2003, because we don't have the funds to be able to do that. So what we pushed out these purchases as far as I think we can. Engines getting 15 plus years of life, which is more than what is recommended. Command vehicles, it's just, without these augmentations, we're gonna keep running up against the fact that we're not gonna be able to replace these engines. And I know you feel you just purchased 2, we have 4 frontline engines. The next 2 frontline engines were 2006s, so, they're coming on 12 years old. They're getting towards the end of their useful life, and the money is not sufficient to be able to replace those in the equipment replacement plans. I don't know any other way to say it. It just was not budgeted appropriately when the inception of this plan was put to fruition. So, are there any questions on specifically the equipment replacement? And I know we're not taking action today, but there's some documents in here kind of where the history is and where we are. So if you have any questions on any of these, please contact me or Chief Taloni, and we can discuss any concerns or questions that you may have.
Yeah, absolutely. I think
That's,
it goes with all departments that
Yeah.
we'll be meeting with all of you to do some more homework. Yeah, Vice Mayor.
This might be a question for Kelly, but the equipment replacement funds, it's money that's accruing, not necessarily being spent in that fiscal year. So is that contributing to the fact that we budget deficit spending and then we come back under budget or above budget? We're not actually in deficit spending. Does this contribute to that at all? Do you know?
Yeah, every department that has the equipment replacement program, they'll contribute an amount out of their budget into that fund, and then when they have enough accumulated, then they'll buy what's on the list that's up for replacement.
So is that being expended annually, or, for a fire engine, that's $750,000, that'll come up once every 15 years, I suppose. So
Yeah.
are we considering that as money spent, or is that, what I'm trying to get at is this a part of the gap that we're seeing each year?
Well, if we cease to put money aside to replace equipment, then we would just have to take it out of the general fund at some point in time, where you'd have to say, okay, now I gotta buy this $1 million item. By each department setting aside, then they have the ability to replace things, but not everything is fully funded. Not, it's not as though And I'll get you guys the breakdown of that fund and what's in there. It's not as though a whole bunch of funds are sitting there unused. Does that help or no?
Sure, maybe if I rephrase, when we put money aside and don't spend it, does that count as revenue that is at the end of the fiscal year?
It's in a separate fund,
Okay.
so it stays in that fund. It's like moving it from one savings account to another. It stays there, it stays in that department's area, and so their balance grows. And then when the time comes and they need to replace one of the things on their list and there's enough in there, then they have that ability. So it stays in the fund and it will continue to accumulate until a department uses, part of their share.
So is it being counted as an expense when the item actually gets purchased or when it gets moved to that?
When
fund?
it gets purchased.
Okay.
Yeah, it's just a transfer out into that other fund. And once the truck or whatever it is purchased, that's when it becomes expensed.
You
So
can get
does that help?
Yeah, so you can get us a
Oh,
breakdown
yeah.
of what's.
Yes, actually in
purchased
your
in there.
budget book too, there's the detail of but I'll get it and I'll email it to everybody.
Thank you.
Okay, thanks.
So I think I went through all my categories of requests. Be happy to answer any questions.
Any
From the
additional
council.
questions from the council or the audience? Oh, please.
So I got a quick question. I came in late, but I heard, I guess you guys are building more hotels. Is that in the plans? What's your contingency plans for 2 through 7 floors? I mean, how, safety-wise, if there's fires without a truck company, how do you, in good conscience, go through with another hotel without having these in place? Or is it resource sharing? Are you planning on getting something from Modesto to come down? Because we have busy trucks too, so I mean, he says he's not gonna say people are gonna die, but if there's a fire, it's gonna happen. And I just wanna know how in good faith you guys can go through with it. Just a question.
I think you bring up a really good point, and that's why this issue can't be
Yeah.
kicked down the road any longer. We've approved also 4-story dorms for
Across from
college
Santa's
students.
house, yeah.
And I think that that's something you did come in late on one part where we are going to look and see
Okay.
to see how this development can pay for itself, and the fact that there is TOT attached to it, and maybe we'll explore an option of whether we increase that so that could be set aside for staffing a ladder truck. But I think it's an urgent issue that we need to find a solution to as soon as possible.
Yeah, I mean, Patterson has a ladder truck.
Mhm.
I mean, the size of the city here, I mean, like you said, you can't kick it down the road any longer. I live in Turlock, obviously, and I know the importance of having a truck company. My brother works for Turlock Fire, and, let's just say, specialty equipment. You guys are running bare minimum on fires here, so, if I'm at work and something happens and my wife's there, you guys don't have a coordinated way to do a search and rescue with the fire attack. If you're gonna go to the roof and cut a hole, which is one of the most important things you're gonna do here, and safety is the utmost importance. Use my brother, for example. I could say, how many times you've been on the roof and cut a hole in the last 10 years he's been here? He may say 1 or 2 times. It's something when things are going bad, you need specialty people to do that. I've had the opportunity to work on a truck company at 2 different cities. And like you said, when it gets bad, when it's 2 o'clock in the morning, when you're tired, when you've been mandated, you need to have the most competent people up there. I'm not saying these guys are competent, but you said it's something you have to do over and over and over again. I wasn't planning on talking, like I said, if you know my brother, he's quiet and I'm the opposite, so I just kind of got riled up, but I just wanted to know I guess, like I said, I came in late, I just wanted to know what the plan was with the hotels and stuff like that.
No, I'm glad you bring up these points, and today we're not prepared, or we don't have an agenda
Yeah, no,
item
I
to
get
take
that.
action, but it is incumbent upon all of us as a council to do our homework and sit
I-
with fire and sit with you guys to figure out where we're going.
And like I said, I wasn't prepared to talk, so like I said, I just came in and started blabbering, yeah.
I like it, don't worry about it.
Thank you, guys.
Yeah, thanks, Jack. Yeah, come on up.
Good afternoon now.
Yeah.
Started this morning. What's unusual is most of the time, if you can get 2 coffee pots and a half a dozen firefighters, you solve all the world's problems by noon. You know, there's no problem with that. My name is Brian Roof, 30-year resident of Turlock. Been in public safety in this county for 30 years now. As far back as when Councilperson Bublak was an RA at Stan State. That's when I started and moved my family here. So I work for the City of Modesto Fire Department. Been almost 28 years now. I've been fortunate enough to have half my career on a ladder truck, either as a firefighter engineer or as a captain for the last 12 years. Most of my career has been out of Station 5, Briggsmore and McHenry, so I've been around the block, you could say. First off, I want to say that the department you have in this town and the guys that you have here, the professionalism that they show and their abilities are absolutely amazing. That's why I live here. You know what I mean? You got a great community. That being said, is like Jack's went off a little bit there as far as a missing piece. I've been doing truck work a long time, and you know, my wife laughs at me. I walk into Costco, I look at where I'm going to cut holes. I walk into Lowe's, that type of thing. I look where I'm going to punch out lights, that kind of stuff. I also drive around and I look at the hotels. I figure out how in the world these guys are going to get somebody out of the 3rd floor, or the taller ones across from Stan State. You know, more than just the normal truck company, more than normal engine company operations, you know, you got high and low angle rescue. We do all the rope stuff. We got confined space, which, you know, Mayor and Council, you've done a great job bringing industry back to Turlock, you know, out the West Main area there. But when you've got hoppers and industrial operations going on, you know, you've got confined space situations that are gonna go on. You've got people that are gonna get trapped in hoppers and augers and all that kind of stuff. You know, a ladder truck, I had a chief one time that said, oh, that rescue, it's just the same as a ladder truck. It just doesn't have that big white thing on top. Well, let me tell you, that 105-foot white thing allows you to do a whole lot of different things. It allows you to get people out of those windows. You know, sprinkler systems fail. The big complex you guys have across from Stan State with the water issues that the fire department handled very well. You know, those same systems can fail. You look at Roseville, how they burn up malls there and all those types of things. So there is a need for more than just the 105-foot ladder, but there's the whole complement of ladders that are on that apparatus and the people that go along with it. When we had the Great Recession in Modesto, at one point we had 3 4-man truck companies. At one point we got down to 1. Not a good situation. You need to have those on the working structure fires. I live on Sconnier's Court, northeast side of Turlock. I was taking my dog, my usual walk in the morning, and walking around the neighborhood, Bristol Park and everything. Fully half the homes in that area of town are tile roof or 2-story homes. My operations, my guys, we don't get off on a tile roof. We use that aerial apparatus to get up there and provide ventilation, to do our rescues even on residential structures because of the setbacks that you have. You know, you can't, a 28-foot ladder isn't gonna work if you got all kinds of windows along the bottom of that house. You need your aerial apparatus to do it. You need to have the guys who are trained to do that to pull up and within a minute get that aerial apparatus working up there. I looked at the report, the budget augmentation report. There was an option 2, which was cross-staffing. If you could, take a big highlighter and cross that out. No offense, Chief. There was a time actually when my ladder truck got closed down and we actually had to go up to Carver and Pellendale to a station up there. I was told, make the best of a bad situation. So I actually cross-staffed a ladder truck and an engine at that time. Coming back from an EMS call on an engine, I get punched out to a vehicle accident on 99, more up by Salida, and I had to run code 3 back to the station after clearing the EMS call, switch all my gear over with my crew, and get on a ladder truck and then respond out to that situation that was on the freeway. It took about a 13-minute time to get there. Had 2 patients at the time. By the time we got out there, got the extrication done, we had 1 viable patient. A little girl died. And that's one of those things, it weighs heavy on your career, you know. Had we had a chance to get there 6 minutes earlier, get those IVs started and everything else and stuff, would have made a difference. I see I'm coming up on my time here. You know, we've got the facilities downtown. Station 1's a great facility. You've got the ladder truck. You got those components, you know. Start out with what you can, you know, whether it's 2-man, 3-man, 4-man is the ultimate because it allows you to break up your teams. You can do so much more. I run a 4-man truck company. my firefighter and I are able to go to the roof.
You can keep going.
Okay.
Finish your thought, yeah.
Both my other engineers, they're able to go on ahead and perform 2-out or rescue for that particular fire on a residential structure. It allows those things. But I urge you, Turlock's grown up. I mean, when I first moved to town here, you know, you drove all the way out to Monte Vista. You drove all the way out to Monte Vista, and before you got to 99, it was farmland out there. That's not the case anymore. You know, you are, like Jack said, you're bringing more hotels in here. We're becoming a big city. Look around us. You know, Consolidated Fire has aerials, Manteca, Tracy, all the places around. It's not just fluff. You know, like the chief said, there's nothing in here that's fluff. Ladder apparatus aren't fluff. It's a needed thing that you need to have. We're becoming a big city, and with that, there's some expense. But you know what? You need to provide that safety to all those people who are coming in and paying for those hotel rooms and the citizens themselves. Anyway, thanks for your time very much. If anybody has any questions too, like I say, I've been doing this a long time. It's what I love. Like I said, my last name's Roof. I have a passion for it. What else am I going to do for a career, you know? If you're ever interested in coming up to Modesto or something like that, you know, you can get a hold of me. Come up, see what we do for operations. We can take you out, set up the ladder, do those kinds of things, and show you what we're talking about, what that capability gives you. I'll hang around afterwards if you want one of my cards or something like that. Come up and grab one from me. But thank you very much. You guys have a great department here. We're just trying to make it better.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you so much. Additional, yeah, please, come on. And then Forrest, you can come up.
My name's Craig Mintz. That's a tough act to follow. So I guess I'd just like to encourage you to continue with your commitment to, you know, provide the city with a truck company. It's vital for safety for not only the firefighters but the citizens. There's a lot of talk about ventilation. I don't know if everybody knows what ventilation is, but it's cutting a hole in the roof and raising that smoke out of the building. And if you've ever been in a house that's on fire, you can't see anything. If you remove that smoke, it improves the opportunity of getting somebody out of the building and keeping the guys safe. So let's continue to help these guys out, provide the citizens and these guys what they need.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. Mr. White?
Forrest White's resident here in town. I just have a question. I hear, you know, the truck and a lot of those things, but when I read the report, 90% of your calls are related to EMS. Why isn't there a priority to have training so at least one paramedic is on every engine? Because if we're talking about saving lives, a paramedic on an engine for a heart attack, the chances of that happening are far greater than rescuing a person in the 3rd floor of a building on fire in this town. 96%, I think, of your calls are 94%. So I just throw that out there. You know, paramedics have qualifications that an EMT doesn't have and can provide emergency services to save a life on 94% of your calls.
Chief?
Just, sorry, to clarify real quick, Mr. White, it's more like about 67 to 70% of our calls are medical. And you are right, paramedics would definitely enhance what we do. I'd be happy to sit down with you and talk to you about some of the challenges we would have going forward with that. Not saying that's not a fantastic plan. The county is looking to go towards that, but again, it's another huge increase. And one other just clarification, just please don't X through phase 2 of that plan. I think, respect to Captain Roof, who's definitely an expert in truck operations. I think he misread what I had written down as far as what I'm calling cross-staffing. So again, we can discuss that, but you know, I'll talk to Captain Roof afterwards about that. So.
It's a very respectful way to say it. On those those medical calls at 60 to 7%, do paramedics also arrive on the scene?
We have AMR is contracted to arrive within 8 minutes of a call. We generally arrive within 5. Some of those are extended. They're a business, for-profit business, and they play, I don't want to say play games, but they, you know, play odds. So there are times when it takes them longer to get on scene. Sometimes they're right on top of us. That's a whole different discussion. I mean, and it's a good way to go. I think that we would have to, I don't want to take up any more of the time on that discussion. I think we would have some challenges with that, and I'd be happy to lay those out for you if you'd like to talk. Just real quick, one other thing, I know you're not taking action today, and I don't know that I stressed this enough, that right around the middle of April, the fire's going to be out of money for their salary savings as far as staffing all 4 of their stations with 3 per day. So not to put a gun to anybody's head, but we'll need direction sometime soon to know if you want us to keep all of your stations open, or if we're going to have to make the drastic decision to drop down a station or 2 each day.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm gonna place that on us as a council when we meet with you, Chief Carlson, and anybody else through the fire department and interim city manager, to talk about it holistically, where we are going with lab truck, where we are going with staffing coming up. Because when we bring up these budget augmentations and where we're going forward, we need to do it holistically moving forward. So I think that's something to bring up with us.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Sir.
Any additional questions or comments for Chief or us, or Paul or Councilmember Dehart? And then Paul.
Just one other thing that I had. Have we encountered any kind of difficulty in terms of attracting or retaining our personnel?
Okay. Okay, not to open up that huge can of worms. I
is.
sat through PDs. I cannot tell you in good conscience that we have a problem recruiting. We'll open up a test, and there'll be people standing in line to be firefighters. We can recruit. We absolutely have a problem with retention. Much like the PD, we become a training department. The 4 current positions we are hiring for are for firefighters and engineers that have been here an average of 2 to 4 years, that have gone on to neighboring departments for whatever the reason. I did an exercise with some of the guys, older guys like myself, that have been here, and we counted 23 people that have left, not for retirement, but for other departments in the time that I've been here. So I guess to answer your question, recruitment, no, yes, we can recruit. Retention is hard, and the amount of knowledge you amass through the years is imperative to be able to, you can't just keep having brand new people every year. You're never going to get that knowledge base, because as the old people like myself go, there's going to be a big gap of knowledge in between.
What about the incentive piece? Is that considered, or would you consider that to be helpful?
The incentive piece as,
Yes.
well, again, I would, without getting to the negotiation side of it, I would say definitely a longevity type of incentive piece would be very beneficial to be able to keep the people that we have. Like I said, we will get the people, it's just a matter of keeping the people and keeping that knowledge, so.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. Mr. Arai?
Can I
Oh,
just
yeah.
quickly add a question
Yes,
as
sir.
it relates to that? Sorry, Paul. When we're, in terms of not having a problem with recruitment, is it usually the case that they're new, or do we ever have, I guess, lateral or from other departments coming here as well?
I don't believe if we do get laterals, they're generally from smaller departments, more rural departments that we have. One of the gentlemen that we are in the process of hiring is a member of a 3-person department. There's 1 per shift that runs a couple hundred calls a year. So no, to answer your question, no, we have a hard time attracting from other agencies. We generally lose to the Bay Area or neighboring departments.
Paul? Interim city manager.
Yes, sir.
But we are not, the person that you mentioned is not a lateral. He took the test with everybody else, correct?
Yes, he's being hired as an entry level. We don't generally bring on laterals like the PD does. We hire at the entry level, and then we train him up on our standards.
Good clarification.
Yes, thank you.
All right, Paul, no one else is allowed to talk until, yeah, I know. Sorry.
Good morning / afternoon, Mayor and Council. My name is Paul Arai. For those of you who are not familiar with me, I'm the president of Local 2434, the Firefighters Association, or Firefighters Union here. Just to answer the quick question about the recruitment, I respectfully disagree based on what Councilmember Jacob just mentioned about lateral type. We don't have laterals. They won't. The other cities and other departments that we lose them to is through the benefits or the salary surveys or the opportunities for other departments. So That's where I kind of differ with Chief here, that there is a slight different different point of view on that. But right, but you said earlier that there wasn't a recruitment issue, and I would say that there is a recruitment issue. So, but moving on, I'll try to be quick. I think Chief did a great job of painting you a picture. I agree with him on the issues that we have and the critical nature that it is. I have some notes. The major thing that I have down is our shortage. And I like to just go through real quick on why. Now, we talked about the truck company, and Mr. White respectfully talked about ALS, which, we agree. But by committing to the truck company, it helps solve these issues. So let's go over the why issue first of the workload increase. So like Chief said, there's been a 40% increase in call volume since 2007. So we have work going up, but we're not hiring more people to handle that work. So what are we going to run into? We're either going to work our employees or membership to death, or they're going to leave, or we're going to lose the efficiency. So just in examples, EMS, we have pit crew, which ties up 2 engine companies, which is 50% of our work, of our firefighters on duty, to a heart attack type emergency for 45 minutes potentially. So 50% of your coverage is gone for 45 minutes. And that happens multiple times. There's new EMT skills that are coming out. And also the increase in mental health patients. So just that EMS side alone, and not to forget the long ER wait room times, shortage of beds, if you will. And that attributes to multiple call volumes. So the patients, we've been on multiple patients where they go to the emergency room and they're back at their home 2 hours later calling us again saying, hey, I didn't get treated, this is the help I need. So now it becomes a revolving issue on going to the same patient multiple times a day, multiple times a week, month, etc. Also, the transient population. So the homeless has poor access to medical care, which 911 becomes their avenue of medical care. So that is an increase, and then you see the increase in homeless population, that's an increase in call volume. The tourists and shoppers. So by expanding, and Council and Mayor, you've been doing a great job of expanding Turlock, but that also brings in more people. So our daily population goes up. So our vehicle accidents on 99, vehicle accidents in that area, majority of the citizens, or they're not citizens, they're actually transients or shoppers from other outside of the city. So the retention issues, once again, the truck company is an opportunity. I've spoken to firefighters that have left here for, over the hill, that they just saw Turlock as a training ground and there's no room for growth. They didn't have the opportunity on a truck that they dreamt about, like Captain Roof said, that, these are the things that attract, that we can attract new recruits or keep, our firefighters here by offering these opportunities. Also the hazmat, arson, rescue, so on and so forth, instructions. Those are the things that we're lacking that we can support and keep these firefighters here. But like I said, overwork and underpaid is one of the big issues. But by adding a truck company, we've helped supplement that workload, or combat that workload. And like Chief said, what we've done so far is purchase the truck, never staffed it. And just to put it in perspective, it has roughly about 10,000 miles on it. So that's less, or around 600 miles a year that it got used. And that's never been staffed. So that just gives you kind of a picture of that. And I wanted to say that because at least in 2001, the council at the time recognized that there was a need for a truck. And I believe with majority of the council, and I've spoken with you individually, that you do agree that there is a need, a necessity to the truck. And that's really not the point today. For me, the point is, let's move forward and let's start that process, whatever it may be. Also, I wanted to address the benefit of having an additional company running a double house. So running 2 engine company or truck company and engine company out of Station 1 will benefit the citizens greatly. Currently, we do have a partnership, MCEST, which is the partnership with Modesto, Ceres, Stanislaus County, where if we have a shortage or if we're running a fire, that they'll come down and help us out and cover our city. Well, Ceres just shut down a station, and that's their closest partner. Also, we have Turlock Rural, which is a volunteer agency, cover our calls for us. And that is an issue because they don't have the same job description or standard as we do. So it doesn't guarantee that you will get 3 EMTs. You possibly may not get an EMT responding to your calls for your citizens. It's not a guarantee that you'll get a Firefighter 1 certification, which is one of the minimal standards for firefighters. And not to knock that agency, but we're at a critical need that we're relying on a rural department, a volunteer agency, to supplement our coverage. So, so today I'm just here to try to put that message of need, and that we're at that point of I don't know, I wouldn't say no return, but we're in a very bad place. So, thank you for your time.
Thank you so much, Paul. And I criticize Dr. Andre all the time about bringing a ladder truck into our community and not staffing it. No, I'm teasing. No, we definitely recognize the need, and I think this council is very serious about trying to find that solution. So thank you. You need additional, yes, I cannot, I'm sorry. Not seeing
Sorry,
it
I'm in your
today.
peripheral. What is the cost, I have a couple of questions. What's the cost of the ladder truck? What is the useful life of it? How much life is there left on this unused
Well,
truck?
although our ladder truck is, you're talking about the physical truck itself, right? Not the cost of staffing it. Just the truck itself. I've talked to Captain Harkson about this, who is our expert, and based on the fact it is 17 years old but has relatively have been used, I think we could extend the life of it if it became an everyday use item for 3 to 5 years, and then put it in reserve status. Because you got to remember, once we staff a ladder truck, we immediately need to be planning for the next ladder truck as far as the equipment replacement plan, which we covered a little bit earlier, which the ladder truck isn't even covered in that. And maybe Captain Roof can help me with this, but I believe the cost of a ladder truck similar to ours in today's dollars is probably about 1.25 million.
Yeah, we just bought 2 brand new tiller trucks, and they were 1.3 million each.
So
there are used apparatus out there that that you can supplement with it in reserve status and stuff. But there are pricey things to have.
How long do they last? What's the useful life of those?
I think what we're trying to get every little bit we can out of our engine company, so we generally try to, I think NFPA says somewhere between 10, 15 years. We generally go towards 15 years useful life and then put it in reserve after that. But then it's also based on how much use it's gonna get and wear and tear.
Generally speaking, 15 years is what we would have to get out of them.
So not unsimilar to a regular engine.
Similar to an engine, yes, sir.
Councilmember Black and then Mr. Franson.
So in 17 years, I'm certain that state mandates have changed. Could you also provide us at the next meeting some sort of understanding of how much the equipment that you're gonna need to put on that ladder truck? 'Cause I presume it's not completely staffed to exact since you're not really using it?
It is close. I mean, when they did in 2001, they did it right. And there is equipment now. Some of that equipment we are replacing as it goes, but the main bulk of the money, that ladder truck is good to go. And it
I just
generally.
don't want any surprises if.
No,
if
absolutely.
going
Well,
forward, we might as well know exactly what we need.
Absolutely. And there are other costs. If you did decide to staff the ladder truck with personnel, you're looking at, the safety clothing for those personnel. And there are costs upon costs. And I think if you look at under my section under ladder truck staffing, it talks about somewhere between 1.6 to 1.8 million dollars to do it right. So.
Great, thank you. Mr. Franson.
Yeah, I got a question regarding the staffing and the overtime. I don't recall, but probably about 2006 or so, I know there was discussion about the overtime. That was before the recession. Again, I'm just going back looking at trying to see how we move forward without having overtime. So, like, how many firefighters have been hired since, say, 2006? Do you know, or,
Well, there have-
I mean, additional positions, sorry.
Right. Since 2006, I believe the only additional position we've had is mine, is the operations chief, which I think still was in existence in 2006. It just went away and came back, so positions have been the same.
Okay. So, regarding the overtime, I guess to look historically and see how we've gotten rid of the overtime, or at least like decreased it, I think, of course, during the recession probably had to, and then how some of that cost probably keeps going back up, like all the expenditures that I'm saying since the recession, and if there's a way to address the overtime. So in 2006, I had spoken to the chief at the time, fire chief, and I said, hey, what's the perfect scenario? Like fully staffed, so we have, I mean, we might as well get the like man hours out of it, but fully staffed, how can we address the overtime? But I was told back then, and I don't know, there's different leadership now, but I was told back then that if we add more people, it actually could increase overtime because we're just adding more positions. So I don't know if you could maybe address that just to guarantee or give us some perspective about if overtime would increase by adding more people. And we can never get rid of overtime.
Well, if you give me enough people, yes, we could feasibly get rid of overtime, but it's not so much based on the number of bodies, it's the daily minimum staffing that we adhere to. So we run basically at minimum staffing every single day, which is why the overtime budget is inflated, because it is cheaper to pay overtime than it is to hire bodies to a certain extent, especially at the firefighter level. So that's why we've been basically running 3 short at the firefighter level. If they've approved these 3 bodies, will overtime go away? No, it will decrease, but it's still based on vacations, holidays, people getting hurt, comp time, things like that. That's where that would be. So no, hiring more people would not increase overtime unless they decided to increase the daily minimum staffing that we're required to have.
Thank you. Additional comments or questions on this? Thank you so much, Chief. Appreciate it. All right, last up, Chief Amfar.
Mayor and council members, I'm just going to follow the outline that I was given. So for the police department, I won't be touching on the MOU portions, but you'll see there are some staffing changes. Item 48 and item 50 actually work hand in hand with each other. We had 6 police cadets. 2 were given to us by council in addition to work our records counter. However, with police cadets, we work around their schedule and school schedule. So providing customer service at that police counter has been inconsistent, and we're actually utilizing records clerks to move up into that position, so it's defeating everything. So you'll see those items of a request. We're going to reduce our cadets by 2 and increase our part-time clerical staff by 2, and adding 1 more part-time clerical staff that we currently have in a position that's assisting the business analyst with payroll and a multitude of other things that are going on right now. Any questions in regards to that?
So this is the records issue. I know you brought forward a while ago something about
Right. So our front lobby,
okay, yeah.
we staff it currently with, the intent was to staff it with cadets, but cadets are college students, and we work around their schedule. That front lobby is open Monday through Friday, 8 to 5, and it's just not working. And I'm using my full-time staff that are on records to staff the front, so it's just compounding. Item 51 is a contract dealing with the alarms. Most of these are housekeeping. I'm moving along with that unless you have a question on the alarm. Moving to the buildings, maintenance, heat and air conditioning. Substantial increases from what we had budgeted. We're expecting to hit 40,000, if not more, this year before the close of the fiscal budget here, June 30th, and we've asked to increase it by 20 for next year. Building maintenance repairs, we've currently been budgeting 7,000. We're increasing it by another 7 to stay in line with what we're experiencing in our costs associated with the maintenance of the public safety facility. Our generator repair contract, we've bumped that up another $3,000 for next fiscal year. Again, batteries alone for that generator, which are coming up for replacement, are going to run you almost $2,000. So we're trying to stay ahead of budget deficit on our spending in regards to the generator line account. Same with the pest control. We brought that to council in regards to our pigeon issues, along with other issues. That contract is going to cost us $9,300, so we've asked for a change in that amount. Moving forward, there are added costs for items 156, our physicals, shots, and psychologicals for our staff that we've continuously going through our hiring process, and those are where you see the increases. Mini storage, we're shutting down the last mini storage that we had, which is a savings of $750. That was utilized for evidence, among other things. Vehicle rental, special operations. As council is aware, we reduced our community outreach engagement team, took our narcotics team of 2 officers, and changed the whole team into a special investigations unit, which, by the way, has had over 25 arrests. And you saw the last one with those multitude of weapons and drugs. So it's a very impactful team with the nexus. Drugs is associated with it, along with human trafficking and other issues. So with that, we're utilizing rental vehicles that we were for the contract on our narcotics team, and we're increasing that amount to compensate for the additional cost for rental vehicles. It's cheaper for the rental vehicles than to buy vehicles, and we're able to change the rental vehicles on a regular basis so people don't identify with the unmarks or undercover units. Any questions on that as we move forward? I know it's late, so I'm trying to go fast.
No, you're good.
Okay. Moving on to supplies general, we've increased the general supplies line. We are always under budgeting, and so we've increased that line amount. This writing is awfully small. So the next item on 160 is our legal resources, electronic subscriptions. They've increased, and that's where you see the increase in 18-19. I will add that for 17-18, you're seeing the full amounts, but as you are well aware, we're in March. Our fiscal year ends in June 30th. So these full amounts are placed there for you just for reference, but the actual costs are going to be a little lower, especially when we're talking about salaries, when we get to the individuals that we need to bring on. Legal resources, again, you'll see the increase. Moving on to item 162, our employee recognition program, we're increasing it by $1,000. The cost increases have just gone up for the breakfast, along with the awards that we give to our employees annually that are selected by employees themselves. Salary and benefits, those are MOUs. Moving on from that. This is a budgeting change on item 164 for the COPS grant. The COPS grant was extended. It ran out actually last year, but because we started it late, it had to be extended, and I'm trying to give you a real short explanation. But because it was had to be extended, there was additional funds that weren't expended in it. Julie, approximately $30,000? $57,000 that were not expended in it. And number 2, because we thought the grant basically ended and we forgot about starting it late, had to bring those 4 months in, we have to reopen that grant, move 4 officers into that grant to show its continuous expenditures. So that's where you're seeing a negative on 17-18, but you'll see it come back on another line item. So here we go into the meat of it. Council remember, and most of the citizens do, that we came forth with council with a recruitment retention project. I will tell you the recruitment part is going great. We already have 3 applicant laterals, so keep your fingers crossed. Haven't signed that signing bonus yet because there's quite a big process that people have to go through, but it is helping us. With that, we're looking for 17-18, thinking of our 9-year movement plan starting right now. 2 officers, and you'll see in 17-18 a salary of $208,000, and then an additional amount coming to $218,000. Is that taking into consideration added costs that come with salary increases or step increases as they move through? So moving on from there, you will see 2 more police officers for 18-19. So remember what I said, 9-year plan, 2 sworn, 1 support. So that's what you're seeing here. Moving on to item 167, 2 dispatchers. I'm asking for 2 dispatchers right now. So that will support the 2 officers that I'm asking for right now and the 2 officers that we're asking for next year. We're also showing in there in red that you'll see that we're taking the part-time help that we had in dispatch, that we're simply not able to completely fill it, and the ones we do fill, take that training and go and work somewhere else. Because they see the workload that's going on right now in our communications center. So that is an impact to the budget of $184,800 for fiscal 18-19. This year, we're showing $176,000. In all actuality, as the fire chief mentioned, even with his staff, it's going to take us, we're not going to get those people here. We're looking for the number to be approved so my staffing numbers go up and we can charge forward to get these people moved and hired. No questions, we'll move on to 168, contract services for Predpol. Council approved predictive policing technology. This is just the final piece of it in regards to vehicle automatic locators, and that gives us the ability to not only have the officers calling off on certain hot areas that predictive policing shows, but it automatically logs the vehicle in those areas as we go. And it gives us a good tracking mechanism. For instance, we found several hot spots in the Monte Vista area. Well, the officers knew about several of those areas, but what they didn't know is some of the areas were behind the stores. So it gives them an idea compounded on top of what they already know. So it helps them along, especially with the amount of available time they do not have. It's much easier for them just to get a glimpse every day from that. Moving forward, unless there's a question, please yell at me. This is pretty small on my piece of paper, so. Maintenance HTE systems, that's our current CAD system. It's a contractual maintenance agreement. We have to extend it, or we have $8,000 more in costs coming up for 18-19. Patrol car decals, as you've noticed, if you haven't, I sure did. We have budgeted $500 for those decals. Whenever a decal starts to fade or gets torn or we have to replace it, $500 doesn't even cover the first car. So we've upped it to $1,500. Item 71, minor equipment, safety equipment, supplies, maintenance, vehicle and equipment required to outfit the 2 new officers that I established. Remember, in the council meeting, I told you there is a cost to doing this. $75,000 was the equipment cost, $52,000 is approximately the vehicle and all the emergency equipment, and then the $23,000 is for the gun, the vest, et cetera, et cetera. Those are impactful, and we have to, as I stated when I brought the purchasing of the cars, we not only have to purchase those, but we have to also continuously budget for them for their replacement. Outside contract labor, that's an increase of, we've always had that, that's your gas, oil, and so forth, and all we've done was we adjusted the numbers there for what we're actually spending, so there's no increase. We've moved them, you'll see in the next line, a $35,000 decrease from what we added to the top one, so those cancel out. 174, again, under budgeted on the gas and oil line, and you'll see the account being adjusted. Training general, this is just an adjustment. We're not increasing our training. Special operations has a training fund, and field operations has a training fund. And what you see here in the decrease, you'll see in the increase on the other one when we get there. So it's just a swap. And Captain Williams, yell at me if I miss anything. Thank you. MOU's effect on 176, won't cover that. Moving on to animal services, kennel attendant. Here is the one for 18-19, the one non-sworn support. You'll remember in the last budget that we presented in front of council that it was status quo. I had asked for animal service officer. Well, we already have 3 animal service officers, and what I am seeing is while they're out and they're they're enforcing our municipal code, ensuring that dogs are licensed and that they have received their rabies and everything, which is protecting the public. I'm seeing more and more hours being utilized at animal services as a kennel attendant because our part-time kennel attendants, which we have 3, we're supposed to have 3, I'm down to 1. As they get trained up, they're going to full-time elsewhere, or Monte Vista Animal Hospital's hiring them. So instead of continuously hiring part-time and training them, I'm asking for an added animal services kennel attendant in 1819. Moving on to non-general fund. We've taken steps to increase our bicycle safety. This is just moving funds from our bicycle safety licensing account. This doesn't impact, it's an appropriation of monies, moving them. We're doing a lot more overtime on bike patrol, bike rodeos, et cetera, and this is where it's used. We use bike patrol at Monte Vista Crossings and a lot of other extra patrols. So we're doing more and more on overtime, and this fund funds the bike patrol overtime because it's specifically to bike safety and pedestrian, et cetera. Item 179 is the COPS grant I talked about, so you saw the 57,000 above. This is the accounting fix. Then we move into 180 and 181, and here are your vehicle movements. So you'll see your 75,000 for the 2 new officers in 17-18, vehicle and equipment, and outfit 2 new officers estimated at 75,000. So that's the full amount there. And with that, I believe we come into the last, which is a police vehicle. This is our community service officer. So, council, you may not have been aware of this. City Attorney Norton and I, along with the previous city manager, had to deal with Federal Labor Standard Act in regards to a 4-11 schedule, 4 on, 4 off, 11 hours. Our community service officers were working those. And we learned through that, even though it was an MOU contractual, that they cannot work 44 hours a week. They have to work 40, and we have to compensate them. We tried to come up with a plan that we could continue with the 411, but it just was not feasible. So they were taken back to a 410, 4 days on at 10-hour days. What that did was it did give, and the reason we went that is because it gave us an overlap of our community service officers. And we, command staff, thought it's going to be a perfect opportunity. We can address some of the parking issues that are going on downtown, and et cetera, going on all over town. We don't have a car for them. We're doubling them up in a car, and that's a waste of staff. So that's why you see that request there for the vehicle. And with that, I believe I'm done. I think I was 2 minutes a hit.
Thanks, Chief. Questions? Yeah, Councilmember Bublak.
Chief, I didn't see it or I missed it. Do we have any overtime issues? I think in the last 9.5 years, I know that we've
Sure do.
met it with all public safety. So roughly?
We sure do. Always have. Police department budgets for overtime and always under budgets. You'll notice and I'm going to steal some of your thunder, Kelly, but in the initial 16-17 closing of the budget year on the bottom line, which said salary savings, $500,000 roughly of that is the police departments. And we utilize our salary savings, just as the fire chief said, to balance out our overtime. So we were budgeted $250,000 just for field operations. We're at 190% of that right now. That's just field operations. I haven't looked at the numbers, but the last look, last week, I believe we're at 140% for communications. That's 140%, so we're way over on our overtime. And it falls hand, you're never going to get away from overtime. We can hire fully staffed right now. The bottom line is they still have to go to court. They still have other projects that come up that we have to throw at it. And that's how we've been getting away with a lot of stuff, is we've been throwing overtime at it. But we're done. The officers are done. With that, I'll be more than happy to answer any other questions.
Additional questions or comments? Yes, Councilmember. Yeah.
Thanks, Mayor. Chief, I just have a couple of logistical questions for you. I have noted with rapt interest the daily logs.
I'm sorry.
The daily logs of activity.
Yes.
And it just seems to me that we've got a growing number or a very steady number of officers that are transporting folks that are being booked in the jail up in Modesto, so that we're having fewer and fewer people on duty here in town. What kind of backup arrangements do we have with any other agencies to ensure that we're adequately covered during those periods of time that our officers are away?
We have mutual aid always in place, just as fire does. Stanislaus County utilizes this on a daily basis. We have CSUS Police Department that steps in and helps us. Besides the Sheriff's Department, we have access to Merced County Sheriff's Department, Merced County Police Department. We have access to Ceres Police Department, Modesto Police Department, and California Highway Patrol. Response times, if it's officer down, the city will be flooded. But if it's an officer needs help because he's fighting someone, you're probably talking about 6-7 minute response time. And for anyone that's ever been in an all-out fight, 1 minute, you're done. I guarantee you. So that's where we're at. That's our contingencies this morning. Before the meeting started, had 5 officers started. You had 1 sergeant available. That's it. I had 1 in Modesto, 1 with a drunk driver arrest inside the jail that can't leave them, and then you had 3 at a residence that was fighting. So that was it. Everything else holds.
And then you throw somebody else in to transport somebody to a doctor's for mental health evaluation, and you're out of luck, right?
You're out of luck. If you're going to the hospital with a prisoner for a psychological evaluation, you're gone 6-7 hours.
One other thing that I've seen is a very steady level of activity with respect to juvenile runaways.
Yes.
What kind of time are we talking about with respect to an officer being committed to addressing that issue and resolving it?
Each one is different, and I'm going to look at Captain Pacheco. He has field operations, and I do see those, and I look at them. Each one is different depending on the availability of the group home that they're from. Captain Pacheco, would you say an average 2 hours, or is it less than that?
Yes, maybe an hour and a half to 2 hours, but then there's also the problem coming back and getting them in the system when they return. And for multiple locations, it's daily implements.
So what most people don't know is when you have a juvenile runaway, it's an immediate, within 2 hours, I believe, must be entered into the missing juvenile system, MUP system, must be entered. And within they must be taken out. We have entered and taken out the same person 4 times in 1 day, literally. And those in and of itself, you're talking about the police officer, but the communication center does it too. So it's a big hit.
Are those CPS regulations, or is it?
There are state licensing issues. A lot of the group homes, and I don't have all the particulars, but some of their rules and requirements changed in who they can have, what risk factors they can have. They changed, so obviously they have more than what they can probably handle, but I can't really give you exact numbers, but since the changes in licensing and so forth, it's been a huge impact on a lot. We're not the only ones. Modesto, Stan County, they're all feeling it.
So we're not out of sync or not out of whack with respect to how many group homes we have?
No, and anytime there's a licensing issue, whether it's a group home or nursing home, we forward it to the licensing boards.
Thank you.
Any additional questions or comments for the chief? Yes.
Chief, on the vehicles, the line 181, is this additional to the 14 that we just approved?
So what you approved was replacement of our current vehicles, yes.
So
This is
one more additional vehicle.
This is staffing the additional officers I asked for. So for every 2 officers, you're gonna get another car.
Any additional questions or comments? Yes, great. Hey.
I'll try to move as quickly as I can, hopefully, I know, man, you're fast. Hopefully I make sense. I'm Greg Oliveira, Council, Mayor, thank you for having me. How many of you had somebody in your house while you're there? Confront them? Have you had somebody in your front yard? I have. How many of you had to deal with crowd control or potential gang problem? I have. and try and keep a crowd from spilling over, try and keep that controlled. I have. It's not a lot of fun. It's difficult. Have you been threatened in your front yard? I have. I could keep going on and on, but I don't want to. Our department is doing a fantastic job. These guys, it sounds like just overall public safety's kind of a problem. We need to maintain our veteran officers. Excessive overtime and having mandatory work days is starting to take a toll on these guys. We as citizens have a responsibility to public safety to take care of those that are taking care of us. We need to make it more competitive. And for us, when you look at it statistically and you see that out of the local areas that we rank as far as pay, our guys rank dead last, that's not acceptable. Turlock has the largest tax base that it's ever had, and our infrastructure is crumbling. Our roads are terrible. It was cool to see. I'm glad that I'm here because it's cool to see some of the stuff that's happening. Shoot, you can go down East Avenue and you'll have to have dental work done, but that's something else. Doing less with more isn't working. Statistically, it's proving that it's not working, so we need to do something about this. The TOT, if we could do something like that and have it going solely towards public safety, I think that would be great, but it's all about sustainability. So if they want to go, let them go, we'll hire more. That's not going to work because the money and the time that we put into new officers is not cost effective. We're just putting good money after bad. So I think that we can do a better job. That's all I have. Thank you.
Thanks so much, Greg. See you. Any additional comments or questions? Before we have one last item then, the Turlock Radio and CAD RMS issue. Can we, who's taking that one on, Chief?
So the intent was to give you folks an update in regards to our Turlock, the radio communications and CAD RMS project. This is a citywide project incorporating every one of us here in the city. And in front of you, you'll have a spreadsheet that Captain Williams did an outstanding job putting together, and another spread, just a box that gives you some options. So this is just to give you an idea of where we are in regards to cost. But before we even get into this, council members, you received emails from me. Directors, you did too. Our radio system is over 25 plus years old. In 2011, it was brought to council where we were hoping to move forward on radios. We ended up purchasing over $500,000, $600,000 worth of portables, moving towards P25 compliance, which is a standard. Whether it's digital or analog radio, the standard of P25 means that you can program and have communication abilities with other agencies that have that type of system. And we began moving forward with that, and in 2011, we were also in the old police building. So when it was brought here, we were looking at 2013 to transfer over, and the idea was we're gonna get a new radio system in the new building because we really didn't know what was gonna happen with the old radio system when we unplugged it. Actually, we were told is, don't unplug it yet. If you unplug it, it might not come back on. So it was too expensive to buy a radio system at that time, and I think we were at $2 million in 2011? Yes. $2 million, an estimate, in 2011. So what we did was, and I thought it was a joke, but Captain Williams told me it wasn't, we went online, eBay, we found a power source, and it's true. We found the power source, and we found additional parts to build the same system in the new facility, and we were able to turn it on before we turned that off to ensure coverage. So fast forward, last year we had a leak in the radio tower that took the radio system down. We lost complete radio capabilities in the city of Turlock with the exception of one channel, and that was fire. They stayed up, we didn't. Called all the officers on cell phones to get them into the station because we had no other way of communicating. Luckily, we had worked out a deal with Stan County, who has been working for the last 12 years to get their tape digital radio system up. And out of that agreement, we said they could put a little repeater transmitter that's hooked up through the internet in our radio tower to use our tower. With that, we got one channel, and that's what we switched to. Unfortunately, Cal State wasn't able to do that, and we had to take them all of our extra portables so they could go live. So for 8 hours, we used one radio channel, and fire stayed on the one that was left. Had that repaired, and that backup power system, the idea was we were going to swap it because the original one was full of water. Well, they didn't swap it. They blew out the original one, and after 8 hours they got it dried. It fired back up. And I said, make sure the backup works. It worked. The last 2 weeks, fast forward again, we've been having problems with the radio. It's getting static. It's cutting out. Just this morning coming in, at 5:30 this morning, I have an officer on Parquet. For those of you, it's the northwest portion of town. And it's all you're hearing is and all he's doing is trying to say he's code 4, meaning he's secure, no problem. Can't even get it out. So it's starting back up again. So what happened when I sent the email out, the radio people came down and they're excellent. I'm glad we have that contract with Delta. We make a phone call and they're down in an hour. Our power source was fluctuating. They don't know why, but they said it's the one that was water damaged, so could be something in it. They were able to adjust the power outlet or power source to put out the full wattage that it needed, and it solved the problem. Well, guess what? It's starting to do it again. And they told us it can go another year or it can go out today. I said, well, let's swap the power source that I have for backup. Guess what? It's not working. Half works, half doesn't. So we're now scouring the internet trying to find another power source that's 25 plus years old. I don't know what luck we'll have on it. Councilmember DeHart, you asked me a couple of questions, so did you, Councilmember Esquer. Yeah, we're on borrowed time right now. So that's where we're at. This is urgent. I know we're not taking action on this, and the whole idea was to bring everyone up to speed on where we were with the project, but this has become urgent. And even if we were taking action today, and you said, general fund, emergency funds that I just saw up there, you got it, go spend it, go do it. We're not up and running till February. It's gonna take time to build the system. We have to order it, and they have to build it. They have to install it. We have to have a secondary system installed first, because as I explained in 2011, we couldn't just swap. You have to have something fired up on the other end to make sure that when you turn this off, you're still live. We're 24/7. So having said that, before you, you have our, anybody have a question? I'm going fast. I know everyone's tired. So before you, you have the, you know what? You mind if I use this real quick? I know we have quite a few people in here, and I think it's important that everyone gets to see this. Ta-da! Yeah. Where's your white balance? Just need to come down. Can everybody see that, or you need it bigger? Okay. So what we have is the radio system project and CAD RMS. They are one project. They have to be together, and the reasons for it are the CAD RMS has a fire station alerting system that is CAD dependent. It's IP dependent. It does not work off of the radio systems. Now, they do have station alerting off of radio systems, and Motorola does sell one. I don't know the cost of it, but the system has to be together because CAD, RMS, and the radio systems are going to be working hand in hand in regards to how our communications are done, inclusive of our mobile dispatch computers that are in the car. So I'm looking at this as one project. So if you look at the radio system, you're looking at $2,375,492. Radio equipment, it's different. The radio system consists of your dispatch center consoles, the mainframe of the radio system that's being built. Oh, and I didn't tell you this. This is a completely redundant system. It is not a system that can be taken out by one site going down. It's a completely redundant simulcast system. For us in fire, what that means is no more dead spots in a manual, no more dead spots in CSUS or out at the junior high. Right now, it's hit and miss. And the reason for that is the secondary spot's going to be on the northwest part of town. And if you can imagine a circle from our tower and a circle from the other tower, they encompass each other. So if one goes out, the other one continues to transmit. But while they're simultaneously transmitting, they're having saturation. So that will deal with that issue. And I'm going to keep looking over at Steve because Captain Williams has been instrumental in the CAD RMS program. He's been working on this for over 2 years. He had a system put together. It didn't work out, and he took the ball running, put together a team of fire and police, and we've already put almost $15,000 towards that out of our training. We just didn't go to training. We moved funds over, but we got it done. So Steve, thank you. Outstanding job. And this chart is his. He broke it down. So what we did was we went through here, and you'll see the system and dollar amounts here. And you'll see in here that the PD and fire are taking 35% of the system costs, which you'll see the breakdown. But under the equipment, those equipment costs are taken care of by the individual departments. Fire currently has approximately $315,000 in grant funds, and that's what puts a little bit more urgency on this. They have to expend those grant funds. Chief, am I correct? August? Must expend those grant funds by August. So if this project's got to go forward, if it doesn't, they've got to buy it on their own. And the cost will go up for them because what I didn't tell you is in this whole project, we're getting $1.2 million discount because we're going through as a full project. So having said that, you'll also notice there's one other, I've put in there electrical, water, fleet, transit, and utilities parks. Those were how those were submitted to Motorola. So the reason I tell you that is because I also told you this is a citywide project. Several of these department entities have enterprise funds, and those funds can be utilized towards their costs, individuals in here. However, there were a few that were grouped together under one, Allison Van Gilder's group, where she will still have some enterprise funds to throw at it, but a majority of her other staff are not enterprise funds, it's general funds. So this was presented to the directors on Tuesday, so they'll be coming forward on what they can fund through enterprise funds, which will give us an idea of how much money we currently have to throw at this. You'll also see Turlock Unified School District on there with our recent school shootings. This is before the Florida incident. Captain Williams and I and Captain Pacheco met with the school district, and we said, what if you could have instantaneous contact with any one of your school sites, and what if you as an admin could put out an immediate notification over your radio channel for a lockdown at any one of your schools, and what if we could communicate directly with you instead of what I've been doing over our last several lockdowns, using my cell phone, trying to call in to alert the administration what's going on because the school site is so involved in their lockdown procedures, they can't do it. Our communication center goes through a lockdown procedure, and they're making notifications, but at the same time, they're dealing with the whole incident going on. And oh, by the way, if there's a 911 fire, they're dealing with that. So the whole idea was for instantaneous emergency contact. So the school district is not on board 100%. Really doesn't impact us if they pull out. Them coming on board didn't create any fund savings for us. It's actually savings for them. They get to get their radios cheaper by coming in with a bunch. But I thought I'd throw that out to you so you could see that. On the CAD RMS side, you'll see that $2 million is put towards CAD RMS, and that RMS packages both, and RMS is report management system, records management system, thank you. See, that's why I'm just a talker. records management system, but it's police's record management system and fire's records management system. The computer-aided dispatch is a brand-new dispatching system, and along with the records management system in the CAD, it will assist dispatchers in knowing who the officers are, how close they are, who they should send, and the same thing with fire, because they'll be able to break down the fire companies, the specialties of the individuals working. You were talking about a ladder truck. This system can identify the availability of ladder truck and whether you have staffing that'll be able to go out on that ladder truck, and depending on the call, will send the right truck or send the right alert. So it's all 21st century stuff. But one of the other things here is we have a reporting requirement coming up for the police department that's due on 2022. And it's racial profiling, and it's mandated by law, and we have to be able to report a whole multitude of different requirements when we come into contact with people, including who we thought that person was before we pulled them over. And it doesn't matter if their windows are tinted. We have to guess that it was male or female, Hispanic. We have to guess all that. And the only way we currently can do any of this is by hand. This system will allow us to do it. So having said all that, I wanted to give you guys this pitch. Not pitch. It was a pitch before this thing happened yesterday. This is a very big project. This has been kicked down the road for as long as I can remember. We talked about kicking things down the road. Well, guess what? This can is up against the curb and there's nowhere to kick it. It's been kicked flat and there's nothing in it. Either we do it or we stop providing services. It's just that easy. And you know, I was asked the other day, what happens when the radio system goes down? We just spent $15,000 on cell phones, and we'll use them. We do have that backup Tate system, and the plan was to send fire to SR 911 to utilize their VHF system. That means dispatch gets the call here and calls SR 911 because there's not a switch to flip. There's no redundancy. Can you imagine the delay? We talked about a 3-6 minute delay for loss of life. What about a 2-minute delay? The golden rule for us on a carotid restraint is 2 minutes. We have to provide medical aid to them in 2 minutes or they can die. This is huge. And I found out, and thanks to Captain Bickle and Chief, that there is a VHF channel on our system that fire can use. So we have emergency procedures in place. We will switch to the Tate system. It's one channel for the PD. We'll switch to VHF to cover fire because county's VHF, staticky. We're not going to jeopardize lives. As for the rest of the city staff, cell phones. You guys are down. So that's where we're at. Funding options. I don't have the total dollar figures. I just advised you folks of that. These are estimations. So radio system, approximately $4 million you'll see up here. Currently we have about 2.3 million identified. That leaves 3.7 million unidentified. And you have approximately 4 options. We thought of a 5th one. But you either use the general fund reserve for the remainder amount, which would be about 3.7 million, or we take a loan out against an enterprise fund for a lower interest rate. And I don't have the numbers here. These are just options. And we'll come back with additional information and options for you folks to make a decision. The other option C is going through government financing. We just checked with Motorola about 6-8 weeks ago at our last meeting, 4.75% on a 10-year loan. I'm not sure what we can get an enterprise loan for or if we can even go that route. And option D is doing a combination of all of those. We're still waiting for the department directors to confirm what they can and can't commit. But the option that's directly in front of us, we're going to have to buy the system. We're going to have to move forward. And this is a 2-phase approach. We will go with the radio first. It's the highest priority. And then the CAD RMS will be viable by 2019, beginning of 2020. So as you see, it's like hiring firefighters and police officers. You can tell us go, but the start line is 5 to 6 months down the road, and the finish line is 12 months after that. It's good though. We're talking about it, and it's a reality, and we got to do it. That's the good part about it. The bad part about it is I don't have much money in my pockets, and I know the city is hurting too. So we'll have to come up with a way to do it, but we do have 2.3 million identified. So with that, that's what I have. I'm more than happy to answer any questions. Captain Williams, did I forget anything? You sure you don't want to come up here and talk?
Councilmember Dulac.
So I know you're just looking into possible funding. Have we, or will we be looking into like Homeland Security or Safe School, anything of that nature that might benefit us or maybe schools or something of that nature?
So we have looked into Homeland Security. Stanislaus County is the gatekeeper on Homeland Security money. We have $10,000 this year we had to ask for. Still haven't gotten a direct answer as to how come the second largest city in the county is not getting the amount of funds. I don't even know how much they're getting. So we have looked into that. We haven't got the answers, and I plan on asking more. As for safe schools, that was one of the reasons we had started thinking about Turlock Unified School District, and they have money, but it doesn't help us. It helps them, and I knew that right off the bat, but like I said, I think that instantaneous communication is huge. It's huge. And currently, we have 6 channels, and we did look at going to the Tate system with the county. It's taken them 12, 13 years to get it up and running. They hired 2 people from Delta Wireless, who's our company that we use, to do it. Modesto's gone on it, and Sirius has gone on their system. But our question was, what do we do for busyness? So when you key up on the radio, you get a busy tone. I just found out that they switched a lot of their trunking or switching systems because they were analog to digital. And Modesto's police chief says they don't have that problem anymore, but here's the problem we run into. It's no different than the Homeland Security. It's run by a board, Stanislaus County's board, and I'm one voice on there, so it's a total loss of control. Number 2, there is no redundancy in the Tate system. They consider redundancy as I have a digital Tate and I have a digital VHF. So currently the Sheriff's Department is running dual band radios, and that's exactly what Fire wants to do because of their contracts back and forth. But that's not redundancy because it's site specific. So if their site goes down, so do those systems. And what happens is if the deputy is out on this side of the county, he switches to VHF or digital because it's better. If he's on that side of the county, he switches to the other channel because it's better. That's not redundancy. So that's where their system is. We could technically try to jump on board their system because we have 1 channel here. We have 6 of our own channels that we own, which are extremely expensive. You can't get them anymore. We offered 2 of our channels to the county to expand their system so we could go there. They want $800,000 to convert it. $750,000 to use our channels. They want us to pay for it, but they're getting channels that are worth probably $1 million each. And their system will expand tenfold. So it doesn't make sense to lose complete control, lose redundancy, and lose the saturation capabilities I just spoke about regarding Emmanuel Hospital and CSUS. Over $1 million difference between the 2 systems. It just doesn't make sense to me. But that's where we're at, so, and I know I've taken up a lot of your time. I am available for any questions that you might have.
Vice Mayor.
The 600,000 from CSUS and 150 from the school district, are those committed funds?
So you're looking at the radio, CSUS has 349,568 and 240,000 in the CAT RMS. They are going to put, that's their money coming forth. So that's part of the identified funds of 2.3 million.
That's been committed from those
Yes.
organizations, great.
And what I didn't talk about here is we're talking about maintenance and equipment and replacement. I also will be bringing forth, you need to look 20 years down the road, and it doesn't have to, it shouldn't fall on this council today to do this. It should have fell on the council 20 years ago to do this. And I'm not one for kicking the can down the road, so I'll be bringing to you what the cost is every year. We should be putting money away to replace all of this again in 20 years. And when I say we, it's a city project. And while the police department's budget may be 16, 17 million, if you break that budget down, we're covering a lot of expenses for other departments, and I'm okay with that. I am. But at some point, we need to break down what the costs are for each one of our uses. Director Cook talked about that and how finance bills for enterprise funds. We need to do the same. We need to see the real big picture of what the costs are and apply them accordingly, so in 20 years from now, you know, when our kids are captains and chiefs, they don't have to come up here and sell it.
Nice. Any additional questions or comments? Or from the audience? Yes.
I have to say, I am seriously worried about not having enough firefighters and not having enough police officers. And the equipment is very important. I hadn't known about the ladder truck and all that stuff, hadn't known about the radio stuff. It sounds like we have to have those. It's just a matter of finding out how it's going to be paid for. But I have the utmost respect for our firefighters and our police officers, and if we don't pay them what they need to be paid, we will keep losing them to other cities. And that terrifies me. We have a coverage right now that people are concerned about more and more. And to find out that we are losing police officers and firefighters on a weekly, monthly basis, it makes me scared. Public safety has to be number one in the city. It really does.
Thank you. Any additional comments or questions? Yes.
In light of all of this, I think that it might be a good idea to have on our next agenda, look into a special tax for public safety. We're not gonna be able to do this alone. We're going to need assistance, and whether it's for personnel and or the property, the equipment, we gotta figure this out. This is huge, and we need the public to be aware and to support this. And I actually think there's a lot of interest in what's going on right now in public safety. So I'd like staff to present something about a special tax, because I believe that most people are not going to trust the politicians to have it in the general fund and it be expended. So let's look at a special tax for public safety and see what happens. I'd like it to be on the November election if my colleagues agree with me.
So unfortunately, the agenda's out for obviously this Tuesday, but I think you probably assuming the 27th or the 10th. I think that's appropriate. So I think we can look at options. I think that was also discussed about TOT, and so we can look and see what's out there. Going back to the CAD RMS system, Councilmember Scare reached out to me out of concern because we did hear your emails, and I appreciate the fact that we were ready to put this as an emergency action item, matters too late for the agenda. And so, Chief, you know, to keep us apprised if that needs to happen, but let's not keep kicking that can down the road. I think we're all in agreement with you on that one. So thank you so much for your leadership on that. Thanks so much, Gil and everyone else who expressed concern. Actually, all 5 of us were very concerned about it. So with that, I will close public participation for the council budget workshop and then entertain a motion for adjournment. Do I have a second? Second. So we have a motion by Vice Mayor Jacob, seconded by Councilmember DeHart. All those in favor say aye. 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 The workshop is adjourned. Now we will enter right back in to our other special meeting, and we have 2 closed session items. What are those? It's not on there, but yeah, we can have.
What's that?
We'll do council comments right after closed session. Or let's do council comments. Go for it. Okay, absolutely. We're going to move on to closed session items. What do we have?
Thank you, Mayor. We have item 9A and B on the agenda, public employee appointment and conference with legal counsel. All the relevant information is set forth on the agenda itself.
All right, do I have a motion to adjourn to closed session? Do I have a second? We have a motion by Councilmember DeHart, seconded by Councilmember Scare. All those in favor say aye. We're adjourned to closed session. Thank you all for sticking around for about 6 hours.